slightest civil rights infraction in front of anyone who's looking, and the next thing you know, you're surrounded by cameras and trending on Twitter. No cop should have to worry about that. Practically every precinct I know has somebody serving desk duty just for acting on deeply rooted prejudices when somebody had a recording device on them. It happened to my partner, and it even happened to our own captain. One day he's just kicking an unarmed pedestrian in the ribs when all of a sudden people with cameras are everywhere, and then they just start shooting what he was doing, all 6 minutes of it. I can't help but think sometimes that could have been me ending up at that desk job. You never know which day of total impunity will be your last, but for a cop, that's just our daily reality.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. Talk radio that you control. And 603-283-6160 is the number you can call to get in on the conversation with us. That's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, it's me, Bonnie,
Lori, and Nikki.
And we have a lot of different things to talk about tonight. The first thing I want to start with is a bit crazy. Ian actually told me about it. Even in jail, Ian is always giving me show prep because he's reading the Wall Street Journal, and I guess they'll print a bunch of other people's news articles too. But he told me about this. I actually got the story from Amnesty International's own website, which is amnesty.org. And they do kind of a lot of just like human rights work, like all over the the world, because international. And apparently it says evidence of Israel's unlawful use of white phosphorus in southern Lebanon as cross-border hostilities escalate. So there's evidence that they use something called white phosphorus. Do you guys know what that is?
Mm-mm. No, not off the top of my head.
I had never heard of it.
I mean, I know what phosphorus is. It's like an essential mineral that you need in your body.
Right.
Or electrolyte, rather.
Right. But apparently white phosphorus is something you don't want in your body, and I only heard about it today. And it basically, if you even get touched by a little bit of it, you'll be poisoned to death. I don't know exactly what will start happening.
So it's very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's it says incendiary, which I googled it. Just says capable of causing fire. So I guess it's flammable. But this is what they're saying Israel shot at Lebanon, which I didn't even know they were shooting anything at Lebanon. I thought it was basically just Gaza. And that's pretty interesting to me because it's apparently a war crime. It's this from this article says the Israeli army fired artillery shells containing white phosphorus, an incendiary weapon, in military operations along Lebanon's southern border between 10 and 16 October, the 10th and the 16th of this year, Amnesty International said today. One attack on the town of Daira on the 16th of October must be investigated as a war crime because it was an indiscriminate attack that injured at least 9 civilians and damaged civilian objects and was therefore unlawful, said the organization. And so I guess an indiscriminate attack just means like they weren't going for a specific target that was people who were involved in the war.
They're just shooting them off wherever.
Yep. And if 9 civilians are injured, I'm pretty sure that means that they're going to die. Like they will get poisoned until they die.
That's what it seems like. It seems, because I looked it up too, and it seems like if you're exposed to it, either like on your skin or if you inhale it, because when it like ignites, there's a lot of smoke that's created. So if you inhale that, it seems like it's extremely toxic, and I don't know if it's fatal, but you'll definitely be poisoned by it, you know?
Yep. It says cross-border hostilities in southern Lebanon have escalated significantly since October 7th, which was when Gaza attacked Israel, I'm pretty sure. Israeli shelling in Lebanon has killed at least 4 civilians and 48 Hezbollah members so far. I just had no idea they were attacking Lebanon. Like, in my understanding of Lebanon, I just don't think of them as one of the people who are like constantly at war with Israel.
Oh, they are. Well, I don't know about Israel, but I had one of my really close friends growing up was from Lebanon, and actually, probably when I was maybe in 6th grade, they moved back to Lebanon.
Wow.
And her and her brother ended up going to college in like Canada and other places, but her family still lives there now, and I think I don't know if she's still in Canada, but she might be in Lebanon. But that was a thing, like, you know, we were always like very concerned about her and her family because like we would hear about like war, like there's just a lot of unrest in all of the Middle East, I think.
Yeah.
So I think like even if they're not directly at war with somebody, like they are still like close enough for it to be unsettling.
I just know they're one of the ones where like, oh, you could go there and wear regular clothes and they won't kill you.
Yeah, it's a little bit more progressive.
Unlike what Alu was telling me today. Alu, he's a caller to the show. And he's going to call in about it so at some point, so I'm not going to like give away his whole call, but he has some opinions on the Israel stuff that we've been talking about, and he was telling me, yeah, everyone in Gaza is just bad people, basically. Like, they're all really bad, and I've been there, and if you went there wearing what you normally wear, they would kill you. Unlike if you went to Israel, maybe some might be offended, but they wouldn't kill you. And I don't know.
So yeah, just like cultural differences.
Yeah. So Gaza is just much, much different from what I've heard than Lebanon. Like, I read this story about a girl who was from Lebanon and she loved America. She had been to America many times, and she wanted to go to this place in Michigan where a lot of Muslims live now. And I forget what it's called right now, but it's known for having like a large pocket of Lebanese people, but also like just a lot of different Muslims from all over the world. And she went there and she said that they were stricter with her, telling her to put clothes on than they are in Lebanon. So she went back.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, my friends from Lebanon, they were extremely religious. They were very Christian, but they weren't like very modest or anything. They were like typical American people, honestly.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit more modest.
So that's why, I don't know, it just kind of surprises me that Israel is like doing a war crime at Lebanon. Like, I just don't think of them as one of the ones that are, like, if they said Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't be as surprised because you always hear about them being like enemies. So, but apparently some Hezbollah people are living there, and I don't know exactly which, I don't know how to differentiate Hezbollah from Hamas, from ISIS, you know, but I just know that that is definitely a gang of criminals. But also the Israeli government is too. Says Amnesty International is investigating attacks by Hezbollah and other armed groups on northern Israel to determine whether they violated international humanitarian law. They say it is beyond horrific that the Israeli army has indiscriminately used white phosphorus in violation of international humanitarian law. The unlawful use of white phosphorus in Lebanon in the town of Da'ira on the 16th of October has seriously endangered the lives of civilians, many of whom were hospitalized and displaced, and whose homes and cars caught fire.
Doesn't the whole war endanger the lives of civilians?
Right. Yeah, right? Yeah, you'd think.
It's kind of strange to be like, you can kill them this way,
Right.
but not that way.
And it is also weird that they're investigating attacks by Hezbollah to see if they violated international humanitarian law. Shouldn't attacks be against the law? You know, unless it's
I mean, you'd think.
Self-defense, but...
I mean, it would be against our law, right?
Yeah. The non-aggression principle, definitely. It says, the person who said that quote was Aya Majzoub, Deputy Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa at Amnesty International. And she goes on. With concern growing about an intensification of the hostilities in southern Lebanon, the Israeli army must immediately halt the use of white phosphorus, especially in populated areas, in line with its forgotten 2013 pledge to stop using these weapons. It must abide by its commitment and stop further endangering the lives of civilians in Lebanon. And I don't know, Ian said that was pretty huge. The article he read from, I think it's the Wall Street Journal that he read, like, explained what it does. And here it does too. It says the usage of white phosphorus is restricted under international humanitarian law. Although there can be lawful uses, it must never be fired at or in close proximity to a populated civilian area or civilian infrastructure due to the high likelihood that the fires and smoke it causes spread. Such attacks, which fail to distinguish between civilians and civilian objects, and fighters and military objectives, are indiscriminate and thus prohibited. White phosphorus is an incendiary substance mostly used to create a dense smoke screen or mark targets. When exposed to air, it burns at extremely high temperatures and often starts fires in the area in which it is deployed. People exposed to white phosphorus can suffer respiratory damage, organ failure, and other horrific and life-changing injuries, including burns that are extremely difficult to treat and cannot be put out with water. Burns affecting only 10% of the body are often fatal. Says the body of evidence reviewed by Amnesty International indicates that Israel has used white phosphorus smoke artillery shells during an attack on the southern border of Da'ira, a populated civilian area. Amnesty International's Crisis Evidence Lab verified videos and photos showing the use of white phosphorus smoke artillery shells in Da'ira on the 16th of October. And their researchers interviewed the mayor of Da'ira, oh my gosh, it's really hard to say, a resident of that place, a first responder who facilitated the transfer of injured civilians to a nearby hospital, and an emergency doctor working in the hospital which received the injured civilians. The team also gathered compelling evidence indicating the use of white phosphorus in 3 other incidents between the 10th and 16th of October in that town and the border towns Al-Mari and Eta al-Chab by verifying videos and photos of these attacks. So yeah, I think they kind of already said that, and I just read it again. But they have, they're talking about that they have actual evidence of it, and they're pretty sure that Israel did do this and that it's a war crime. And I just think, I don't know, I want to share all sides of the story, obviously, if I heard the same thing coming from Hamas. Apparently, some people think that we on Free Talk Live are being more like on the side of Gaza, and I'm not on either side more.
Yeah, I think a lot of people assume like if you're not for Israel, you're like for Palestine and Gaza or whatever. But I think we've pretty much all of us have made it pretty clear on this show, like we're not on anyone's side. If anyone's side, like we're on the side of the actual human beings that live there, who really are making none of these decisions. They're not fighting with anybody. They're literally trying to survive. Like, that's whose side I'm on. I don't really, not that I don't care about the conflict, but I'm just not interested in choosing a side of two like gang organizations, essentially. Like, all government is the same. And I think for some reason, and I've heard like a lot of libertarian, like freedom-leaning people kind of have these beliefs where like, for some reason, because of all of like the religious background and history, like for some reason, like Israel's the one government that they like.
Yeah.
It's like they can conceptualize like, yep, the US government's bad, all these other governments are bad, except for Israel.
Yeah.
And I don't get it. Like they're a gang organization just like the rest of them. Like what's the difference?
And the thing about it is, even if somebody believes that their religion tells them that God gave them this land, it should really just be up to like whoever can, whoever lives there can take control of it, can defend it. And you shouldn't be creating these mafia type organizations like the government that go in there, bomb people, keep people from being able to move around, and, create something that's basically artificial, like a country that's artificial, where you're demanding that your people get to stay. I just think that that's wrong, just because you believe that, your God told you it's your land like 6,000 years ago or something.
But I mean, as far as the country goes, because this was something I didn't know or even really think about, but because Israel wasn't a country until 1948, right?
I don't know the
So,
exact year, but yeah.
I think it was like right around that time, like post World War II. And essentially what I heard, was somebody, fact check on me, like somebody, is, if they know more about this topic, they are more than welcome to call in and share. But apparently it was after World War II to essentially like give Jewish people a place to go.
Right. That's what I've always heard.
So, I mean, how is that like the Holy Land? Because like whoever did that, I don't think they were like, yes, this is the exact Holy Land of Israel.
Well, it's where all of the monuments were that people say like, oh, Jesus was here. Like the people that lived there believed that it was the land that they talk about in the Bible. And
so it
they
sounds
just kinda
like
took it.
There were other people living there, right?
Yeah.
So there were other people living there, and then like now, because I think like if you're Jewish, you can just like go there, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
like,
now
prove that you,
it just seems like, okay, this land was like stolen away from somebody else and like
a bunch
given
of governments
to a bunch
came
of people.
together,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
created a new government in this area. I don't know, like if they killed a lot of people to get people out of the way, but people are definitely like misplaced or displaced, and then they created this little place called Gaza that they have borders all around, and it's already very difficult to go in and out of it if you wanted to, and now obviously they've been like completely closing it down since the October 7th attacks. And I just think that all of that is so wrong. Like I just don't think that you should use governments to create a place for some people to go because of, Hitler. So let's create a place for some people to go because, well, this terrible thing happened, which requires us to do terrible things to other people. And as far as like the way that people act in Gaza, like being really bad, like they would stone you if you weren't wearing a hijab or whatever. I think that that's all really artificial and happens because of governments, because they live in a place where they're not allowed to just get on the internet like us. If it's like Saudi Arabia, they have basically like a Chinese style internet blockage, and Saudi Arabia, for another good example, also is really strict with immigration, even people coming in and visiting, stuff like that. I just don't think people would still be living this way. It's not like natural. It's not like it's in these people's blood. It's not like these people could never change. It's all, the ultimate problem is the government. So I'm not going to blame all people for the way that even a big chunk of them act, that have the same, DNA.
Well, it's a cultural thing, right? Like, I mean, if you don't know any better.
Yeah, they're indoctrinated.
They are.
Yeah.
By government and by their religion and everyone around them, their family, their friends.
And that's the thing too. So like, say like in a country like Saudi Arabia, where like women essentially like don't have any rights, right? I mean, you like can't leave the house without a man. You can't have a driver's license, all this stuff. If you're like if like pretty much everyone in your society believes that, and you're the one guy who's like, no, that's not cool. Like I want my wife to have like freedom and rights. I mean, you will be ostracized just the same. So it's like, it's scary to be that first person, and I think like all throughout history, like when, even in the US, when we were like fighting for women's rights and like the right to vote and all of this stuff, it's scary to be the first person to be like, no, I'm standing with these people. This is wrong. Or like, the slaves being released, like even if you were like housing slaves or during the Holocaust, like if you were hiding Jewish people in your house, like all this stuff, if you were that person, you were equally as in danger. Like you think if you were hiding Jewish people in your house in Germany or Poland in World War II, you were also going to that concentration camp.
Yep.
Because you're a traitor now. So like you're not sticking with the rest of the group, you're not sticking with the narrative, so you can't be trusted anymore. So you got to go. So it was a very typically it's very dangerous to be the opposition, as we should know here.
And it's tribalism.
The only reason that it's so dangerous too is ultimately because of people who believe that they have the authority to have all the weapons and take them from the average people. Like the Germans were disarmed right before crazy stuff started happening. And so, these people are living under governments. They're told what to do. Some of them have kings still, like in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And I just think that all of human society would have progressed so much more, would have been, past believing like, oh, well, my God told me I get this land and therefore I'm going to kill you for being here. they would have all those people over there, it would be so much better off without governments. Obviously, a lot of people just end up creating their own governments, but as far as I know, from what I've heard, Hamas was also actually created by a government, Israel, and then they end up, however many years later, I think it was like 50 years later or something, maybe not 50, but many years later, they end up attacking Israel. So, but the thing is, they wouldn't have existed without Israel. So, it's just like the CIA goes and creates all kinds of terrorists.
Yeah, or I'm sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. I mean, apparently Osama bin Laden worked with the CIA before he, did everything he did that we know him for.
Oh, that's kind of how any governing organization works. They have to create, an opposition to keep people.
Yeah. To keep their power, right?
To keep their power, keep people scared, keep people following orders.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the church worked. The devil wasn't the big scary devil a long time ago. He was like a trickster. But the Catholic Church was like, well, we need something scary so that people listen to the rules. So let's create the devil.
Well, and that's a great point because hell isn't even mentioned in the Bible, right? Or if it is very briefly,
it's not described like it is
in modern religion. I mean, it
ideas.
is described to the detail. I remember reading a children's version of the Bible where they were short stories, right? And they were talking about hell, and there were very terrifying detail. It was like a horror movie. These little flying demons fly around, they zap you, and it was talking about all the sorts of torture in a children's book.
That's so bad.
And it's that stuff wasn't even the Bible. Where do you guys get this stuff from? You just made all this up to scare children?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's awful.
It's terrible. Yeah, I hate that story. You've told that a lot. I didn't read a children's book about this, but my mom was really into people who believed that they went to heaven and all this stuff when I was a kid. So she would read all these stories, and she believed for a little while, and then she ended up being oh, well, another preacher that I read said that was a deception. But she believed for a little while that there was this story where this lady went to hell to see it, and Jesus was there keeping her safe, but was showing her around, and she saw Marilyn Monroe in there burning and being tortured, which made me sad, and also Michael Jackson. And she saw a little boy in there, and Jesus told her what had happened was the little boy had just disobeyed his parents, and then he ran out in the road and got hit by a car, and he was 10, and he was in there being tortured and burning.
That's convenient, right? So if you disobey your parents, that is a great way to create obedient little children.
Right.
And then me and my mom were just that's really terrible. I wish I didn't hear that. I don't want to think about children who don't know any better, disobeying their parents, running out to the street, getting hit by a car, and ending up in hell. But then later, another prophet person that she liked to listen to said, yeah, God came to me and told me that was a deception that was shown to the other prophet lady. But you shouldn't think badly of that person. It was just a mistake. It really should be that...
It's so weird, right? So it's okay, well, I should trust you and not her.
Yeah.
Why do you have the authority? So God told you the truth, but not her? That's so confusing.
The Bible literally talks about... What's the word? Sorry. False prophets. So it should be
wouldn't that be those
time, right?
People?
You should only get one chance, and then you're a false prophet.
I would think so.
That's one of the things I had a problem with as a kid was I was raised Catholic, and the whole original sin thing, if you're not baptized, then you go to hell.
Whoa, that's messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't raised Catholic, so I didn't really know that was a thing. That's terrible. 603-283-6160 is the number for you to get in on the conversation. Tell us what you think about this white phosphorus use, or anything about war or the Middle East. We want to hear your opinion. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up.
Food waste is the single largest component in our daily trash. I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. American landfills gobble up an estimated 73 billion pounds a year, and lots of what we throw out is still edible because the way it's labeled can be confusing. If the label says, best if used before, that's when its flavor or quality will be best, not whether it's safe to eat. Use by is the last date the product is at peak quality. Other than infant formula, it's still safe. Sell by tells the retailer how long it can stay on the shelf. And freeze-by dates are self-explanatory. That's what to do with markdown meat or poultry. How are you coping? Post your inflation hacks at andyoucanquoteme.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Thousands of people remain in Gaza at the Rafah border point, hoping to cross into Egypt. Earlier, around 400 people were able to leave as Egypt opened up the crossing for the first time since the fighting began more than 3 weeks ago. FSN's Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv has the latest.
Hundreds of foreign nationals are waiting at the Rafah crossing, desperately hoping this crossing from Gaza into Egypt opens a little later on Thursday, after being told to go there, that their names may be potentially on this list of around 400 or 500 people when the crossing opened a little later on Wednesday. Now, we do know that around 320 foreign nationals were allowed to leave the Strip Wednesday. They made it through that crossing into Egypt, along with 70 or so Palestinians.
Donald Trump Jr. is testifying in a New York courtroom in a $250 million lawsuit against the Trump Organization. He's the first of the former president's 3 eldest children who are set to take the stand. Trump himself will testify on Monday. Interest rates in the United States will remain on hold after the Federal Reserve decided not to raise them from their 22-year high. The country's central bank opted against an increase for the second meeting in a row, but Fed Chair Jerome Powell is not ruling out hikes in the future in a bid to bring down inflation. FSN's Benji Hire reports.
No change, a pause again by officials in the nation's capital. Following 11 straight rises from March of last year, interest rates will stay between 5.25 and 5.5%, where they've been since July 2023. The Federal Open Market Committee waiting to see if its strategy to contain inflation is working before it considers tightening monetary policy even more. Its unanimous decision to maintain current rates coming at a delicate time for the US economy and global financial markets. War in the Middle East, warnings of renewed oil price volatility, and a recent bond market sell-off, all complicating the outlook.
US President Joe Biden is expected to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping later this month in California, according to the White House. Officials there say the leaders of the world's 2 largest economies have agreed in principle to meet on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco. FSN's US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
The White House has said that President Biden is expected to have a tough conversation with President Xi, saying that the intense competition between the two countries requires intense diplomacy and that US policy towards China has not changed. It's said, though, that the logistical details of this meeting were still being put together, but that it was planning for a constructive conversation.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
Talk Live, and the number for you to call to get in on the conversation is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And in the studio with you tonight, it's me, Bonnie,
Lori,
and Nikki.
And I wanted to tell you about Dash. This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash, Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Rising fees have made Bitcoin useless for purchases, but Dash continues to have fees less than 1 cent per transaction, and its features ensure Dash is undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace. From a technical standpoint, Dash transactions are irreversible, and its network is protected from 51% attacks by their chain locks technology. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, so it's great for merchants. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at dash.org. And a big thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn more about Dash. Dash.org. I just wanted to read a little bit more about this white phosphorus stuff. There's a little bit more left in this article, and then we're going to move on to talking about other things, but it says Dr. Haitham Nizer, an emergency doctor at the Lebanese Italian hospital, told Amnesty International that on the 16th and 17th of October, medical teams treated 9 people from the towns of Da'ira, Yarin, and Marwan who were suffering from shortness of breath and coughing, which he said was due to inhaling white phosphorus. Most patients were discharged from the hospital the same day. Okay, so it's not that if you breathe it at all, you die. Ian seemed to be of that, he seemed to believe that if you got it on you at all, you definitely would die, but it's still pretty bad, I guess, and that's why it's a war crime to use it on civilians. It says the regional director of the Lebanese Civil Defense, Ali Safadine, who facilitated the transfer of injured civilians to the hospital on the 16th of October and the subsequent evacuation of the town on the 17th of October, told Amnesty International that the civil defense received calls for help from residents who reported bombs that are producing extremely bad odor and causing suffocation once inhaled. 4 members of our staff, as well as a number of people living in Da'ira, were admitted to a hospital for suffocation in the past few days. We were not able to even see our own hands due to the heavy white smoke that covered the town all night long and lasted till this morning, the 17th of October, Ali Safadine told Amnesty International. The description is consistent with white phosphorus, which produces a dense white smoke and a garlic-like odor. So yeah, that's what it's like to get hit by white phosphorus. It smells like burning garlic, I think they said. No, just a garlic-like odor, and it produces such a dense smoke that you can't see your hands in front of you. It causes suffocation. That's just absolutely terrible. It also caught a bunch of people's cars on fire and burnt places to the ground, and that's just absolutely terrible. It says the amount that's just the size of a fist can, oh wait, never mind. I don't know what that means. It says that reignite when exposed to air. I don't know what that means. So yeah, just wanted to bring that up. Ian wanted me to talk about it, and I think it's pretty important to hear about what's going on over there. It's not something I like reading about or hearing about. Like, I'm never really that interested in talking about war, but there are people that are getting, like Nikki said, so interested in just looking at one side of this, and I don't think that's a good way to be. Just because it has something to do with their religion, like the Christian Bible even says that those who support Israel will be blessed and those who don't will be cursed. But I mean, it doesn't even mean the country, because obviously the country didn't exist.
And you know, I've heard that point made that like this isn't the authentic Israel,
right?
This is a man-made Israel. And like you said last segment, like some of their, you know, the biblical historical structures are there, so you could assume that might be the area. But how do we know that this Israel that was created by other governments to essentially put displaced people, how do we know that is actually like that governing organization is the authentic Israel? We really don't know.
Yeah.
And people have even called into this show and said, oh, don't worry about this war. This is a holy war, and it's good. Yeah, we had one guy calling, like, this was when, like, it first popped off. This guy was like, no, it's okay. Just keep praying.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, people are dying. But that's how a lot of people think. They're like, well, no, it's cool. We just have to sacrifice all these people for the second coming.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of people are trying to expedite that process. They're like, they'll do anything for Jesus to come back. And I'm like, but that means creating, like, you know, the apocalypse, right? Like, you guys want the apocalypse to happen? Like, and it seems like they do. Like, it seems like the powers that be, like, it seems like all these government people, they want, I mean, because everything they do, like starvation, like disease, like it seems like they're breeding all of these atrocities.
There are a lot of religious people who want to die. Like they
can kill themselves then,
they can't,
right?
Because then they won't go to heaven.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's one of the
But
rules.
they want the apocalypse to come, and they want
somebody else to kill them.
They want to go to heaven because it sounds so great, and maybe their lives here aren't so great.
Yeah.
Right. Ian and I believe that heaven is just what you make of your life, and people can be in hell in their lives, and they can be in heaven in their lives. Not that I don't believe in an afterlife. I actually do. I don't have like a specific one really in mind. I just believe that I believe that I'll be in a good place because I'll be a good person. I keep bringing them up, but there are these YouTubers named Sam and Colby, and I am so obsessed with them. Like, I have never been more obsessed with YouTubers, probably. At least not since, like, middle school when I thought Shane Dawson was funny. But I love Sam and Colby so much, and I've been watching their shows all the time. And basically what they do is they started off being people who did exploring like abandoned places. They would film themselves going in and exploring like places, like even in like Chernobyl, they've been there, places that have been abandoned for a long time, just showing you what they find, crawling around, climbing into holes and stuff like that. And one day they did a haunted house, and they changed their whole show because they got so interested after an experience they had with some they had things with them, like things that would beep if EMF got near it. But the experience they ultimately had that changed their whole channel to be investigating the paranormal was they were just sitting there, and they were able to ask questions out loud, and there were knocks coming from all over the room that they were in this haunted place called the Queen Mary ship. So that's just basically a little bit about them. And one thing, it's not like I'm saying, oh, this is now my like forever in concrete belief, but one thing that they have learned from all the little communications they've had with ghosts and their most recent videos, I really recommend people go watch them. They met these mediums named Satori and Cody that basically have a gift where they can hold hands, and you hear all these knocks happening, and they've done so much testing with these people, like different places. They bought them shoes to wear, so that way it's not like, oh, you're making knocks come from your shoes. They've done all kinds of different tests with these people, but these people, Cody and Satori, they'll hold hands, and knocks will start happening, and they've been like spelling with the alphabet messages from dead people. Like, they won't ask for a specific person to come through, but the first one that like really was crazy on the most recent series that Sam and Colby put out was Sam's grandma. He just started crying. He was like, oh my God, that's my grandma's name. And she just spelled out like, I'm watching over you and your family members and stuff like that. And one thing that's a huge theme that they keep getting from the messages from all of the dead people, they always like to ask them if they could have like whole conversations like that, like with Satori and Cody, who live in Rhode Island. They ask them, what do you want to tell people about where you are now, about the afterlife? And they always answer with like good or love. Like, it's a good place. I'm in a good place. Stuff like that. And
I would think that everyone would be. Like, even if you are a bad person in, the here and now, in the physical realm, I think that you're going to go, like, I believe in reincarnation. I believe that life is about growth, and each of our carnations is about learning and growing. And if you're a bad person in this life, that just means you have a lot more to learn. So I don't think there's necessarily punishments after that. I just think like maybe you die, maybe there's a life review,
right? And
then you get recycled back. Maybe it's back on Earth. Maybe it's to some other far away, distant realm. Like, I have no clue. There's like, this is just my suspicion. Like, I don't believe this is like absolute fact. But it just wouldn't make sense to me. Like, I don't subscribe to the philosophy that like everything has to be like scary and we constantly have to be fearful, and everything's bad. It's like, maybe everything's just can be good.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
basically, as a kid growing up Christian, I did have this, it took me until I was an adult and really thought about it, but I had this background feeling that everything was bad. Like, I lived in a bad, scary place, and I had to watch out, and there was only a small amount of good that I had to hold on to stay safe. And once I got out of that kind of thinking and started just instead believing that life is good, that is the most comforting, good feeling, like that there's some like good force out there, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be like anthropomorphic if you don't want it to be, but in my opinion, it's kind of like a personality, but so undefinable because it's everything. It's just love. It's not like a man or a woman or a certain shape or anything like that. And I feel like there are definitely my, like, maybe dead ancestors or other guides around me all the time. I'm so in awe sometimes when I look back at my life and think about how things could have gone and how they didn't go. I just feel like I'm being protected all the time. And go ahead.
Oh, I think we're all a collective energy. Because everything is electrical impulses. All life on Earth requires electricity within it to exist. And
so
I think that we're all
one.
All one big collective energy that, when you die, that electric energy leaves you. Energy cannot be destroyed or created. So it's just constantly being recycled into new life.
Yep. That all sounds like stuff I could definitely believe with what you guys believe. And it's like what I'm saying, like, I don't have some kind of very specific place I think that you'll go when you die or what it'll look like or what it'll be like. But I like to, like, explore it, and I'm interested in learning more about it instead of being terrified like I was when I was a kid, that if I lied and then, I accidentally got hit by a car, then I would go to hell because I didn't remember to apologize for that.
I think that's why so many people are afraid of death. And that's why, like, so much of, like, this medical, like, technology is just keeping people alive as long as possible.
Right.
I think it's also because of money, obviously.
Yeah.
Because the longer somebody's alive, the longer you can milk them of insurance money and this, that, and the other thing. But yeah, I think it would be a much peaceful if people were just like, yeah, I'm ready to go. I don't need to be, like, kept alive artificially on life support.
The person who's dying usually feels like, I'm ready.
Yeah, it's
but
usually
it's the
family
families that keep them alive.
Yep.
I've heard that so many times. It's terrible.
So have create your own do not resuscitate order. If you're old and you're like, no, if I died right now, I don't want somebody to break my ribs and resuscitate me and do all this crazy stuff to bring me back to life. If you feel that way, if you feel that way, you can absolutely have an advanced directive where you can either say, like, do not resuscitate, or you can get more specific, like, yep, I want you to do CPR, but I don't want to be put on a vent, or I don't want to be put on, you can get more specific with it. And I think this is all, like, legal stuff too. Like, I don't know if you have to meet with a lawyer or not. I don't know too much about it.
Will or something.
Like a living will,
you probably
sort
just
of
need
thing.
a notary.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like, someone, like a power of attorney sort of thing. But yeah.
Well, it's a nice conversation. I like talking about that kind of thing, and I don't even necessarily think that it has to be like war against me and my parents who believe something else. It's just like, just don't try to make me feel bad in life.
Yeah.
Like, make me feel like I'm living in this terrible, scary place.
Well, it's fear, right? So it's like, and a lot of religious people will be like that. They're just like, I love you, and I'm so afraid that because you're not following the same beliefs that I, like, they're so indoctrinated by it and they believe it so strongly that they're like, I mean, if you don't believe what I believe in, then you must be going to hell, or you must be in some sort of danger or trouble. And I think that's why
you won't be in heaven with me.
Yeah, and I mean, for, like, people who don't believe that, right? It's, like, very off-putting. It's like, can you just, like, agree to disagree? And it's very hard for them, even if they're finally like, yeah, we're not going to talk about it. They're still going to be praying for you at night, and it's
which I don't even mind, like, my parents praying for me, because I think ultimately it's just, like, good intentions.
Yeah, like, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think sometimes, like, stuff like that comes from fear, where they're like, I have to pray for, my daughter or my granddaughter because they don't believe in this, and I'm afraid, like, they're praying, like, I hope that she finds Jesus and finds, like, it's so, and that's not, I mean, still, like, it's coming from a good place. Like, I don't necessarily think it's bad, but I think maybe it's like worse for them to be, like, stuck in that. Yeah, it's like the worrying. It's not good for you. That's
why I was basically always trying to tell my mom and grandma about whenever Ian, before he got sentenced to jail, and Ian's my husband, if you're listening, you don't know who that is. He went to jail completely wrongfully. And before it happened, my mom was really stressed out and praying because she loves Ian too. And I understood, but I just would ask her to not worry, because all worrying does is hurt the person worrying and not help the person who you're worrying about, and it could potentially even hurt them. I believe that, like, putting out really negative energy constantly thinking about a person could kind of do something like a curse, because it's like what you're saying about everybody being connected and being electrical impulses. I think it's not really like, oh, a magic spell, it just magically affects you, but I think there's energy in human beings.
So like manifestation type
Right.
of like law of attraction kind of philosophy
like,
stuff.
Quantum, like quantum, I don't know if it's quantum mechanics theory or something else. No, I can't remember what it's called, but they have found out that you can affect something very far away from you without touching it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
With
And
your
that's
mind.
even like with Reiki. So I did the Reiki training really long time ago, and we would do stuff like that, like distance Reiki. And we were like doing Reiki on these dolls. And then like you were supposed to be envisioning your partner in the other room, right? So we had like no contact at all. And they're like, you have to, when you do the other side of the person, and I forget how we communicate to tell them to flip over, but regardless, they're like, when you like flip the doll over, you have to be very careful, because some people, like if you just whipped it over, people like the person in the other room would feel that.
Whoa.
And at first I was like, I don't know, like I believe in a lot of woo-woo stuff, but that's like a little too far out for me. Like, yeah, sure, like if I throw the doll on the ground, this person's gonna like, you know, kind of get a jolting feeling, but they would.
That's crazy.
And like people reported it, and it was like kind of like at the same time. It was just, it was strange because the person in the other room had like we had no communication at all.
Yeah.
I think it was like someone going back and forth. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it's just like it's strange.
Energy is definitely a real thing. Have you ever met somebody and you're like, oh, their energy is
Yeah.
Yes.
really bad, and then you come to find out they're a terrible person?
Yeah.
You know, it's
Like,
usually
ding, ding.
usually right. That's what intuition is. Usually is just feeling all of that energy around you
Yeah.
in the situation. It's not magic.
I had
Yeah.
I had some friends who were identical twins in 6th grade, and she told me, well, I was like more friends with one of them, and we would eat lunch every day. They're like separated. It was not right. Like we were in the same room, but the twins were separated because they were in different classes. But anyways, so I was talking to one of them, and she told me when they were kids, she didn't remember it, but their parents always told them the story where they were getting shots, like vaccines, and they were doing it one by one. And when her sister was getting the shot, she was crying and rubbing her like arm or whatever
because
it was.
they're connected. Yeah.
And she could feel it. She was saying that it hurt exactly where her twin
Yeah.
sister was getting.
Yeah. If we're all recycled energy, think twins are at the same time.
I mean,
that's
yeah,
coming
they
in-
share DNA.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like crazy.
Right. At the same time, that energy is splitting in half. So basically, you're two parts of a whole energy field when it happens. Because, you know, there's not an electrical impulse in the egg itself
Yeah.
or the sperm itself. But once they become a zygote, the spark of life.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with these girls, but they're conjoined twins. I wish I remembered their
Her name's
names.
Brittany and something else.
Yes, Brittany,
Yeah.
Brittany, and some yes.
I don't remember the
So yeah, so essentially they share a body. So they share all of their organs from the waist down. I think like the reproductive system down essentially. Like I think it starts at like the large intestine is where they like only have one, but then from like small intestine up, they have two of everything. So, and that's the reason why they're able to be conjoined and like not die, because they have two hearts, two lungs, and those are like obviously the most important systems. They have, you know, whatever, two livers probably. But watching their videos is absolutely fascinating because when they speak, they complete just so effortlessly. Complete, like one will be talking and then the other one will just, they go back and forth to finish a sentence. And it's almost like they have two brains, right? They're two separate people pretty much. But they are so used to, I mean, they obviously share DNA. They're like basically kind of one person, but not really. But they not only do they like share DNA and they're so connected, but they have lived their life together every single moment of every single day, even when they're sleeping. They are physically connected. So that has just created such a strong bond between them that they know exactly what the other person is going to say. And it is just like, because I'm like, and it took me a while. It's so flawless the way they do it. It took me a while to even notice it. And then I was like, wow, they do that a lot. And you would think like the other person would be annoyed, like, oh, you're interrupting me, you're finishing my sentence. But it's just like that is how they exist on a day-to-day basis. And it was just absolutely fascinating to see. And it really kind of just draws to the point of the connectedness of twins and like what it means to like share a DNA, you know?
Right. They are really fascinating. I first heard about them on like a TLC show when I was a kid, and then I always see them around because they're like the only ones. I think they're the only conjoined twins that have that exact setup.
Yes. Yeah. Well, normally I think a lot of conjoined twins share like either lungs or heart, like when they're conjoined in that way, and they die very shortly after childbirth because for that much body mass for like all the organs, you need 2 hearts and you need 2 sets of lungs. Like they won't be able to survive, especially if they have 2 brains. I mean, if you have 2 brains, like you at least need 2 hearts.
Yeah.
Like you can't, and 2 sets of lungs. Like that's really important to even like be able to survive. So I think that was the only reason why they survived.
Well, yeah, I believe in all that stuff. One thing that made me feel a lot better about believing that we're all one, because sometimes I think about people I really don't like, and I'm like, I don't want to feel like I'm one with them. I don't want to go into heaven and I just jump into some big ball of energy and I'm literally attached to them. I don't want to do that. But one thing that made me feel a little better is this idea, and I'm not saying like I now subscribe to this idea, but it's a nice idea. There was this guy named Emanuel Swedenborg, and I really like learning about his experiences. He lived in the 1700s, and he had like a great job. He was a nobleman. He was really rich, and he was like a genius. But he quit all that just to start writing these books, these huge books of basically experiences he started having in his 30s. He started seeing dead people and stuff like that, and then he got to talk to a lot of them about what it was like on the other side where they were. And basically the way that they describe being all one is they were all one, but basically the people that are most like you, the people that share the same loves and feelings, and the people that you are your people that you get along with, are all basically achieving the same type of thing in heaven. And they basically are, the idea is like you and that group of people, you don't have to hang out with the feet because you're the lungs. You're doing your job. In this huge, you basically create this huge person that is God. And I love that idea.
That's pretty cool.
That makes me feel so much better about being attached to people.
And I like that concept of like soul groups, kind of. I feel like there's a different phrase for it, but I can't remember. But like, so people you're really, really close to in this time, like probably like your partner or like your mom, your sister, like if you're really, really close to those people and have really strong bonds with those people, as you reincarnate, there's a theory like they will be, and it's kind of weird to think like, oh, your mom might be
your daughter.
Yeah, like something weird like that. But people do kind of like recycle in that way, and it's kind of comforting to think about. It's like, I will be reincarnated, maybe, but maybe my mom will be there. You know what I mean?
Ian will definitely be there. 603-283-6160. I would like to hear anybody else's opinions on this. It's Free Talk Live, so you can talk about whatever you want. 603-283-6160. More coming up.
Some of you have wanted to support Free Talk Live's mission on a monthly basis, but don't want to support Patreon. Now we have an alternative that also helps our premier streaming platform, Odyssey. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join at the top of the channel. You can subscribe for $5 per month, and unlike other subscription services, Odyssey adds their processing fee on top, so it'll cost a little over $5 per month, but Free Talk Live will receive the entire amount you pledged. Higher donation tiers are available if you're feeling so inspired. You'll get a special membership badge that's visible in the Odyssey chat room, and if we get enough supporters, we may enable members-only chat. This new subscription method is a great way to decentralize our direct listener support away from just Patreon and also support a libertarian-run business, Odyssey. Please visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join to subscribe to our Odyssey channel and help support spreading our message around the planet. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join today.
Eleutheromania, the insatiable desire for freedom. It's the new 3-song heavy metal EP from Captain Kickass. Available now on your favorite music app or get it directly from CaptainKickass.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Thousands of people remain in Gaza at the Rafah border point, hoping to cross into Egypt. Earlier, around 400 people were able to leave as Egypt opened up the crossing for the first time since the fighting began more than 3 weeks ago. FSN's Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv has the latest.
Hundreds of foreign nationals are waiting at the Rafah crossing, desperately hoping this crossing from Gaza into Egypt opens a little later on Thursday, after being told to go there, that their names may be potentially on this list of around 400 or 500 people when the crossing opened a little later on Wednesday. Now, we do know that around 320 foreign nationals were allowed to leave the Strip Wednesday. They made it through that crossing into Egypt, along with 70 or so Palestinians.
Donald Trump Jr. is testifying in a New York courtroom in a $250 million lawsuit against the Trump Organization. He's the first of the former president's 3 eldest children who are set to take the stand. Trump himself will testify on Monday. Interest rates in the United States will remain on hold after the Federal Reserve decided not to raise them from their 22-year high. The country's central bank opted against an increase for the second meeting in a row, but Fed Chair Jerome Powell is not ruling out hikes in the future in a bid to bring down inflation. FSN's Benji Hire reports.
No change, a pause again by officials in the nation's capital. Following 11 straight rises from March of last year, interest rates will stay between 5.25 and 5.5%, where they've been since July 2023. The Federal Open Market Committee waiting to see if its strategy to contain inflation is working before it considers tightening monetary policy even more. Its unanimous decision to maintain current rates coming at a delicate time for the US economy and global financial markets. War in the Middle East, warnings of renewed oil price volatility, and a recent bond market sell-off, all complicating the outlook.
US President Joe Biden is expected to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping later this month in California, according to the White House. Officials there say the leaders of the world's 2 largest economies have agreed in principle to meet on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco. FSN's US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
The White House has said that President Biden is expected to have a tough conversation with President Xi, saying that the intense competition between the 2 countries requires intense diplomacy and that US policy towards China has not changed. It's said, though, that the logistical details of this meeting were still being put together, but that it was planning for a constructive conversation.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the case against a ceasefire in Gaza. Calls for one are growing by the hour in many Western capitals as Israel's ground offensive continues. And in Washington on Tuesday, congressional testimony by Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was interrupted by protesters excoriating the Biden administration for failing to call for a ceasefire. But in the US and Europe, many political leaders are reluctantly overtly to demand a cessation of hostilities. Former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott with his explanation of why.
Israel has every right to take all reasonable steps to destroy Hamas. The difference between Hamas, which deliberately targeted civilians, and Israel is that Israel will do everything it can to avoid civilian casualties, but when you are in a situation of total war, civilian casualties can't entirely be avoided, particularly when Hamas is using civilian Palestinians as human shields. So to call for a ceasefire is effectively to render Israel impotent in its necessary and justified campaign against Hamas.
That argument, of course, is rejected by, among others, the UN Secretary-General. Antonio Guterres continues to press the case for a ceasefire, saying Palestinian civilians are getting needlessly killed in Israel's war on Hamas. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again, thousands of people remain in Gaza at the Rafah border point hoping to cross over to Egypt. 400 people were able to leave Gaza earlier. Donald Trump Jr. is testifying in a New York courtroom in the $250 million lawsuit against the Trump Organization. And the US Federal Reserve has opted to leave interest rates unchanged for a second meeting in a row. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
It seems like we're constantly hearing different fitness advice. Exercise 2 to 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes a day. And don't forget cardio. But don't exercise too much or you'll get hurt. So, how much exercise should you be getting? Well, actually not that much, since the human body is only built to withstand walking a short distance before lying or sitting down again. In fact, a group of biologists from Stanford found that walking more than 5 feet at a time can cause joint pain, fatigue, and even extreme hunger. The study concluded that the maximum effort the human body can safely endure is reaching for an item high on a shelf. Our bodies simply aren't built to stand up and move around. So maybe those high-intensity spin classes and daily jogs aren't such a good idea. Instead of walking up the stairs every day, try taking the elevator whenever possible. You can even use a fitness tracker to let you know when you've been exerting too much energy. Your body will appreciate it. For The Onion, I'm Jill Hooper.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
To Free Talk Live. It's talk radio that you control, and we actually have a call, so I'm going to get right into that. But first, the number for anyone else to call to get in on the conversation with us is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, it's me, Bonnie,
Lori,
and Nikki.
And I'm going to go right to your phone calls and thoughts. John in Nebraska. What's on your mind, John?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Y'all were talking about the afterlife and electricity, and I kind of want to agree with that. I don't necessarily believe that there is an afterlife, but if there was, I would think that our consciousness is maybe built up of some sort of energy, and our body has there's electricity there. So I don't know what happens to energy. I don't think I don't know. I kind of wonder if electricity just goes to the ground. I just kind of don't know. If our consciousness could somehow survive, but I suppose there's plenty of theories on that. But as far as surveillance goes, I've been thinking a lot about this. There's been no better time. I got rid of my phone for 2 years, and I felt so good. There was people, I didn't have to call anybody, and nobody was really calling me, and my job pretty much stayed the same. It was pretty easy. I didn't have to use an email or a phone or nothing for my job, but I really enjoyed that, and I feel like the government just wants everybody to have a phone, wants everybody to be on a social media site, wants to be able to monitor everybody in every way, shape, or form. But I kind of also feel like private corporations are doing the jobs for the government. I think that they're collecting all this information, when you go to the doctor or, you get some health care or wherever it is, even you go get a haircut. A lot of people have to schedule an appointment online. I kind of like the place where you just walk in and just go get a haircut. But
dang, that's one I hadn't really thought about.
Oh yeah, it's a bunch of little stuff like that. I mean, you really can't do anything without an email and a phone number, and you need to provide all of this personal information almost for anything you do. I feel like everybody's asking for your address, and it's why do you even need to know my address? You know what I mean? Or my phone number. It's for everything. It feels like,
Yeah, that's that's the thing that kind of bugs me. Yeah, you go say to like a bookstore, they want your email address and your phone number. Well, somebody who works there might have a problem with you, but you may have never met them. But all of a sudden they type your name into the system and they find out everything about you. Or something, depending on where you work, not just a bookstore, anywhere. But I guess, I was just kind of wondering. I know a little bit of the stories with the FBI and the harassment and stuff, and the court case and all that stuff. Probably can't talk too much about that, but I was just wondering if y'all ever thought that maybe you were being surveilled.
We know we were. They admitted to that. That was part of the discovery, I think it's called.
Yeah, they had.
They were surveilling our house.
They had a 24-hour a day for multiple months. Camera outside of our house. They had like stuff written in discovery that was like, red Subaru, this license plate from like when I first met Ian and visited.
Yeah, and even during the Kate, the trial was going on, we were obviously still here doing the show 7 days a week at that point. And we would say stuff on the show, and they were using recorded snippets from things that Ian or Aria was saying on the show, and they would like use it in court the next day.
Yep.
So they were like, we knew they were listening to the show, and then in the discovery they were saying that they were surveilling the house.
Did you ever feel like maybe somehow they got inside the house and maybe put a recording device? Or
no.
I know that Samsung puts like microphones inside their TVs and stuff. Like there's appliances that have that. You think that they were ever?
I don't think any of us use those types of appliances. I mean, okay, we have iPhones, but they have not done anything like try to get iPhone to give my text. They just took my phone.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I am like a really paranoid person, and I know my phone's listening to me right now. I always assume I'm being surveilled. So
Right.
and I try, I don't let it like disrupt my life or anything, but I'm kind of careful what I say. You know what I mean? Like I kind of just like always assume that somebody is listening. So I'm careful with what I like text people and what I say and stuff like that. But I've never really like in this house specifically, I've never really felt like there was a bug or anything like that. Or because I thought that like right after the raid,
right.
Obviously they tore through the whole house. They unplugged a bunch of equipment in here. And I thought about that. I was like, I'm sure they put some recording device in here or something like that. But I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't really think so either, because I mean, they would have to get a whole other kind of warrant to be able to do that.
But they do stuff illegal. They can do whatever
to be able
they want.
to use it, that's the thing.
Yeah, to be able to use it. Yeah, so then what's the point? Yeah.
So why would they do that if they?
Who knows? Yeah.
So they can
Okay,
listen.
well, thank you for taking my call, and have a good night.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Thanks for calling.
I'm glad there are people out there who, care that much about privacy, because it's just a normal human being thing to care about privacy, and the government actually wants to criminalize it. In Ian's trial, they were using it as they're basically using it as evidence. They're saying, why would he advertise that he respects your privacy unless he was a criminal? And
That's
jury
the thing,
that.
right? So if you're not willing to forego all of your personal information all the time, then it's like, okay, well, what do you have to hide?
Yeah, you hear
Nothing.
people say that all the time. Oh, well, if you have nothing to hide.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, also, like, I'm not, like, ashamed of my naked body, but I'm not going to change in front of an open window because I like my privacy.
Right.
Is that hard for people to understand? Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Ian told me a really cool story that I had never heard before. He's been reading just like this, like, not an encyclopedia, but this book that's called like the Book of Knowledge or something that someone sent him. Like you could get lost reading it for a long time, so it's nice to have in jail. And it tells you all these like facts about different things. And this one section is all about the invention of the telegraph. And they were talking about how the people knew that their messages were gonna get read by just like the workers at the telegraph company. So they started creating codes, and basically people would put out books like all the time with new codes as they were getting discovered. And people were like, the telegraph company was getting annoyed because they were also the telegraph companies were getting annoyed because they were also basically putting in things that were like LOL, meaning laugh out loud, things like that. So that way they didn't have to pay for longer characters. And it just made me think, wow, like humans for a really long time have cared about privacy. It's not like just some kind of newfangled thing while they're terrorists about and they want to make sure that the government doesn't know what they're doing. Like, people have always cared about privacy.
Only their own.
Yeah.
They don't care about other people's
Yes.
privacy. And you see it in parents that are reading their kids every text message, putting these watchdog device or apps on their kids' phones so they can see everything they're doing, taking their doors off their bedrooms and stuff like that. Like,
that's terrible.
It's awful. And so, they don't care because their kids aren't people. They're the only real person.
Right. I hate that. We talk about that a lot on the show. Like, Nikki has a lot of stories about people who spank their kids and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we did have a story about surveillance, which is probably why he brought it in, because I titled the show tonight something like the surveillance state gets bigger. But I want to go to this call. Unscreened caller, you're on Free Talk Live. What's your name?
Hey, it's Ridley.
Oh, I wondered if it was you. Could have been you, could have been Tom. I just saw it was from New Hampshire. What's on your mind, Ridley of RidleyReport.com?
Ridley in New Hampshire. Okay, so the In-Depth NH is a media outlet that is focused some attention on a cover-up lately that I wanted to talk about. If something's covered up in the government, that's a good indication we should be talking about it, right? So I guess it's State Rep John Stone, a Republican of Claremont, is trying to keep his police discipline record secret. And In-Depth NH, a reporter from In-Depth NH filed a right-to-know request 3 years ago, and I guess the union leader and the New Hampshire Civil Liberties Union have now joined in to try and find out why this is supposed to be so secret. And the Supreme Court of New Hampshire is about to hear the case.
Is there any guess on what's in his record?
They do seem to do a little bit of vague it's not speculating on the In-Depth NH article. It's they do go into it a little bit, but I do not want to libel the guy.
Yeah.
So if I were to try and paraphrase what they're saying, I don't understand what they're saying well enough to be able to properly paraphrase it for you. I've got the article in front of me, and I remember the part that you're looking for. So I'll just say the article says, quote, according to records obtained through the 5th District Court, District Division in Claremont, Stone was subject to a domestic violence protection order filed by a Claremont woman in September of 2006. The order was withdrawn 2 weeks later.
So he got the protection against her, not the other way around?
It says, quote, Stone was subject to a domestic violence protection order. Quote, what that means is somebody was trying to keep him away.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure that's the part that's even being covered up, though. So
it's definitely, someone in the government.
Even have to, isn't that just supposed to be, shouldn't that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I agree that somebody in the government should have to disclose things like that. I don't believe it about everyone. It's like we were saying, I believe in privacy, but if you want to rule over me, then you should be able to be open and transparent, which is what the New Hampshire Constitution says all government workers should be.
Well, I mean, the guy's police record should look like the Shire forums, right? It should look like forum.shiresociety.com, where everybody on the internet can see every word, basically. And that's how a police report or a police record should look for a police officer, because they're forcing you to pay their salary.
He's a police officer?
To be able to, he was a police officer, but he was dismissed from a police department this is quote, Stone was fired from the Claremont department in 2006 under circumstances that were never made public, unquote.
Wow. In that case, then I definitely want to know, because most likely if you're getting actually fired from a place, you're probably like beating your wife, beating your girlfriend or something like that. I'm not saying this guy was, and I'm not saying I know that, but it's probably something that bad.
I mean, those things are usually allowed, so it might be worse.
Yeah.
Well, actually, my theory is they only fire you for doing the right thing in the police department.
Yeah. That actually, that you might be onto something with that.
But there are plenty of stories about people who it's not like that big of a deal. They get fired from being a police officer from one spot because they were a sexual assaulter.
Yeah, and then they go somewhere else.
They get another job somewhere else as a police officer, like in the next county. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that all you had about that in-depth NH article, Ridley?
That is all. It's indepthnh.org.
Well, thank you so much for your call. Yeah, if somebody, is listening and they think that I'm being a hypocrite by saying, oh, I believe in privacy, you shouldn't know everything about me, but I want to know what this thing is this ex-cop is hiding, it's not a hypocrisy at all. You should be able to tell the public everything about yourself if you want to rule over them. And that's just the very least. I would rather you not have the ability to rule over me and have people voting and believing that you should be allowed to rule over me and everything. But if we're going to do that, you should follow the New Hampshire Constitution that says that all government employees must be open and transparent and not be hiding some kind of, probably sexual assault record or whatever it is. But, yep, that's all I had to say about that. And that's definitely a Ridley topic. But we did have a story about the UN surveillance state that Lori brought in, and that's why I titled tonight's show Surveillance State Getting Stronger or something like that. And I think that's why the other guy called in about it. So what do you have about that, Lori?
This article is from sociable.co. It says, UN Gates Foundation 50 in 5 campaign aims to roll out digital public infrastructure in 50 countries by 2028. The 50 in 5 campaign is an agenda concocted by a coalition of unelected globalists to accelerate technocratic control through digital ID, CBDC, and massive data sharing. The United Nations, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and partners of the Rockefeller Foundation are launching their 50 in 5 campaign to accelerate digital ID, digital payments, and data sharing rollouts in 50 countries under the umbrella of digital public infrastructure by 2028. It already said that.
And I think that that's a silly word that we need to talk about. Digital public infrastructure. It's like, oh, we need roads, we need bridges to go over water bodies and stuff like that. We need this infrastructure for people's digital identities. It's
They can't even get physical infrastructure, right?
Right.
So, with a virtual launch event to take place on November 8th, the 50 in 5 agenda bills itself as a country-led advocacy campaign. By 2028, 50 in 5 campaign will have helped 50 countries design, launch, and scale components of their digital public infrastructure, according to the official announcement. Sold as a mechanism for financial inclusion, convenience, improved healthcare, and green progress, DPI is an inclusive phrase applied to a looming technocratic governance system powered by 3 foundational components: digital ID, digital payments like central bank digital currencies, and massive data sharing. Advocates are adamant that DPI is essential for participation in markets and society, just like we saw with the vaccine passports, only on a much broader scope. If successful, DPI will give governments and corporations the power to implement social credit that can determine where and how you can travel, what you're allowed to consume, and how you'll be able to transact with your programmable money. Think individual carbon footprint trackers, ultra-low emission zones, and CBDC programmed to restrict less desirable purchases, all of which are being pushed by proponents of the Great Reset. The stated goal of the 50 in 5 campaign is that in 5 years, 50 countries will have designed, launched, and scaled at least one component of their digital public infrastructure stack in a safe, inclusive, and interoperable manner.
Oh my God, what does that even mean? It's inclusive. We're watching everyone.
That's right.
No matter what you look like.
They just want to make sure that we know they're not racist or whatever.
Yeah. It just sounds like it's something good.
It's just like some woke speak. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Achieving this goal involves demonstrating the potential and momentum for DPI through showing various approaches to DPI, their progress and outcomes in countries across different income levels and digital maturity statuses, shortening the DPI learning and adoption journey for countries through facilitating learnings and best practice exchanges, use of open standards and specifications adoption, and sharing of technologies as digital public goods, and evolution of local engineering capacity and vendor ecosystems. While the 50 in 5 campaign has not yet disclosed which countries will be participating, the website reveals that they will be both advanced and emerging digital leaders.
Well, I don't know. I just think all the stuff that they're saying so far, covered a lot so far, is all really bad. And it's all stuff that is basically fascism. Corporations working together with the government to share information about you, control your life. And they'll try to say, oh, it's not like total government control, so what's the problem? But the problem is that corporations, they basically need government permission to exist. And they're basically just unofficial little branches of the government at this point. And when you're giving them a bunch of your information and you need their permission to do certain things, it's no different to me than the government controlling your life. And we already learned that that's been happening in smaller ways during COVID, thanks to the guy, I don't remember his name, Matt Taibbi, who came out with the information that the White House was controlling Twitter and Facebook, controlling what they were allowed to, letting people post and stuff like that, because there was, misinformation about COVID.
That's where that all stemmed from.
Facebook still does that. I went in to look at the settings on my Facebook account because I wanted to change the feed so that I actually saw the new things instead of the things from a day or two ago that they show. And in there, you can change what's suppressed for you. It's all set to be suppressing anything negative in their opinion. Sensitive pictures, sensitive topics, misinformation.
So how do we change it? I only want to see sensitive things and like misinformation.
So I tried to change it because I'm part of a bunch of farming groups.
Yeah.
And I tried to change it so that the sensitive pictures wouldn't be pushed to the bottom of my feed.
Right, yeah. You want to see it. You're like, I'm not disgusted by this. Like, it's fine.
I need to know these things. I need to see
exactly.
these things. And you can't change that one.
Oh, that's weird.
It's automatically suppressed and you can't unsuppress it.
So Instagram is also part of Meta. And on my birth business page, every single the whole thing is blurred out, like my whole entire feed, because it's all videos of women giving birth.
Right.
But that's the only things I'm following, so they have to show it to me. That's all there is.
Yeah, I'm in a group called Necropsies for All. It's farm animal necropsies if something went wrong with somebody's animal, and that's the same thing. You go to the feed and it's just blacked out pictures with the little eyeball.
Just because there was a sick animal and they show people making the animal better?
No, it's like an autopsy for an animal.
Oh, okay. Well,
So,
if somebody wants to see it,
open them up and see what went wrong.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't be following the group if I didn't want to see that.
Right,
I would
it's
unfollow
in the name
them.
of the group.
Yeah, and I think this is another thing too. Especially in the age of social media, I'm always seeing comments on different posts you should have put a trigger warning, TW, this is triggering for me. And it's listen, your triggers are not the world's responsibility.
Right.
And there was, I think it was in one of the birth groups I follow on Instagram, she posted about a miscarriage and someone messaged her and was like, I'm pregnant and this is really triggering to me. I do not want to see this.
And she's talking about her own miscarriage?
No, she was sharing a post from another woman, but she was trying to she had permission, but she was trying to spread awareness essentially and make other women who have experienced miscarriage feel seen and be I'm not alone, because it's such a taboo topic that no one talks about.
Yeah.
And then you're wow, actually this is super, super common. I felt when I was going through that, I was completely alone. A lot of women feel that way. So she responded to the woman that was this needs a trigger warning. I'm pregnant and now I'm triggered. And she was well, you know what? You posting your maternity photo shoot is really triggering for women who just had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
So it's not just
either side should be able to control
exactly
what anyone posts.
And I think that's why that was her point, was are you going to put a trigger warning on pictures of your baby and pictures of you being pregnant? No, but people don't think about that stuff because those are supposed to be happy things, right? But guess what? For someone who maybe had just lost a child or experienced some sort of loss or maybe they're infertile, whatever, that isn't, that could be triggering for them. So it's
right. And it's just
it's your
Going online
responsibility.
is the same thing as going in public. You should expect to see other people talking and things you might not want to see. 603-283-6160. More Free Talk Live is coming up.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash masternodes. The masternodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by that treasury. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash paved the way by doing it first, nearly a decade ago. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
Feature Story News in San Francisco. I'm Ira Spitzer. Thousands of people remain in Gaza at the Rafah border point, hoping to cross over into Egypt. Earlier, around 400 people were able to leave as Egypt opened up the crossing for the first time since fighting began more than 3 weeks ago. FSN's Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv reports that a UN official managed to cross in the other direction and enter Gaza. Interest rates in the United States will remain on hold after the Federal Reserve decided not to raise them from their 22-year high. FSN's Benji Heyer reports.
No change, a pause again by officials in the nation's capital. Following 11 straight rises from March of last year, interest rates will stay between 5.25 and 5.5%, where they've been since July 2023. The Federal Open Market Committee waiting to see if its strategy to contain inflation is working before it considers tightening monetary policy even more. Its unanimous decision to maintain current rates coming at a delicate time for the US economy and global financial markets. War in the Middle East, warnings of renewed oil price volatility, and a recent bond market sell-off, all complicating the outlook.
U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to meet China's President Xi Jinping later this month in California, according to the White House. FSN's U.S. correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
The White House has said that President Biden is expected to have a tough conversation with President Xi, saying that the intense competition between the two countries requires intense diplomacy and that US policy towards China has not changed. It's said, though, that the logistical details of this meeting were still being put together, but that it was planning for a constructive conversation. The high-stakes face-to-face meeting comes as the White House is navigating major wars in Ukraine and Israel, and that is putting additional pressure on an already strained US-China relationship, which has been damaged in recent years by a trade war that began during the Trump administration.
And in U.S. markets, the Dow was up 0.7%, the S&P 500 rose 1%, and the Nasdaq led the way, up 1.6%. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. It's talk radio that you control. And 603-283-6160 is the number to get in on the conversation with us. 603-283-6160. And in the studio with you tonight, it's me, Bonnie,
Lori,
and Nikki.
And we've been talking about the surveillance state tonight, just growing larger and larger and more intrusive into your lives. But I wanted to go straight to the phones. We have David Hathaway in Arizona. David, what's on your mind?
Yeah, good evening, Bonnie, Lori, and Nikki. Yeah, you a few days ago, Bonnie, had mentioned you were interested in paranormal things, and I was going to talk about a couple of those. But first, I wanted to mention out here where I live, Tucson is just an hour away, and they are now training Ukrainian pilots to fly American F-16s at the Air Force Base in Tucson. So this is obviously a prelude to, for U.S. fighter planes being piloted by Ukrainian pilots to go fight Russians. So I don't know. I hear that, and I just think how crazy it is that we're now training foreign pilots to fight Russians in U.S. fighter planes.
That's terrible.
But anyway, that was the first thing I was going to say.
Can I ask? Sorry, is this really the first time that this would happen? Because I thought that the United States was already giving Ukraine planes, or is this just new because this is the first time that the U.S. would be training them specifically to use them, or is this plane a bigger and badder plane that we haven't given to Ukraine yet?
Well, from my understanding, they've beefed up the other NATO nations around Ukraine, provided more aviation support. But this is it's a single seat fighter plane, the F-16. It can either drop bombs or it has machine guns on it. It is a fighter plane, but it can also be outfitted as a bomber. But it is a single seat, not like an F-14 or F-15 that are actually like a front and a back seat. But from my understanding, this will be the first time that the U.S. is directly providing fighter planes to Ukraine. But I could be wrong about that.
I could be wrong too. I just knew that we'd given them some kind of, well, definitely money, and I thought that we gave them, or not we, but the United States gave them planes, but I could be wrong about that. So I don't know. I just wanted to know.
And at that Air Force base in Tucson, they also trained Afghani fighter pilots and to fly American F-16 fighter planes too. It's just kind of that particular base specializes on F-16s through the Arizona Air National Guard. So it's kind of become a training site for foreign pilots on wars that the U.S. is supporting. So it's a big deal in the news out here, but it's probably not at the national level.
Well, that's pretty creepy. I mean, I wish that they would just let the conflict die, go away. But they're helping it continue.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to talk about, you mentioned an interest in the paranormal. And, of course, I'm an elected sheriff out here, and there is a jail that's part of the sheriff's office. And I've heard this from numerous officers in the sheriff's office that we have what's called a rubber room. It's like a cell that has a rubber floor, rubber ceiling, rubber walls, and there's nothing else in there except a drain in the middle of the floor. And I've heard officers say that on the graveyard shift, they hear screaming from that cell and banging on the walls, and they'll go check, and there's nobody in there. Yeah. So I've heard that from multiple officers, and they swear that it's true, that they'll think, wow, I didn't know somebody was in there, and they'll go, there's a flap that you open to see who's in the room to check on them. It's like, say that there's an inmate that's banging their head against the wall and trying to harm themselves, they'll put them in that rubber room. But anyway, I've heard that from numerous people, and they're not joking. They say, especially like on the midnight, the graveyard shift, they'll hear the screaming and weird sounds and banging on the walls, and they go check, not thinking that anybody was in there, and then there is nobody in there, but they still hear the sound.
Yeah, I've worked graveyard shift at different hospitals, nursing homes, and different healthcare facilities, and a lot of other nurses and other staff will have some really creepy stories.
In hotels too. I've had so many.
I'm sure.
I haven't had anything that was really unexplainable. Just terrible feelings, I got to get out of this room.
Feeling of dread, or oh, somebody's watching me, something like that.
But so many housekeepers that they wouldn't be there at night, but they would be in rooms alone, have had weird things things shut, doors shut, and stuff like that shouldn't have shut. Little things like that. Nothing crazy, but I feel like there's a lot of residual energy in places like that. Think about the terrible state of mind people have been in this rubber room he is talking about.
Yeah. Oh, and same with nursing homes.
Yep.
I mean, like, I've had
any
some
hospital.
really creepy experiences in nursing homes where I'm like, and you can just feel like if you're like kind of sensitive to like energy, like we were talking about earlier, you can feel when something's like, oh, you're like you have a good feeling, right? And then you have bad feelings, and it's like, yeah, that's intuition or whatever. But you can tell, like, if you're having an experience that's out of the ordinary, you can kind of tell if it's like malicious or not. You know what I mean? Like, if you get this feeling of dread and some weird stuff is happening, that's.
And then, like in that rubber room, that there has been people with very intense feelings in there before that were suicidal, and it was probably the most traumatic moment in their whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any truth to, negative energy getting concentrated in a certain place, it would certainly be at a place like that where the person is it's the worst moment of their life. And then I don't know if the people are really hearing things or if there's just that kind of negative vibe in the area where it brings to people's imagination, some like that feeling of dread or whatnot. Now, one of the other ones, there's like two more I want to tell you about. I live right next to a river that starts in Mexico and it comes into the U.S. So this is another paranormal thing I've heard my whole life, that people say that there was a woman that they call La Llorona.
Yep.
That means the crying woman. And
they made a movie about it.
There's a version of that kind of that story in different parts of the country, but down here they say her children were swept away when the river was flooding, and that she goes down the river. They'll see her at night, a figure in white, looking and crying and calling for her children. And people around here, my whole life, I was born here and grew up here, they say they have seen her out there crying and looking for her children. So I think that's kind of maybe sort of universal in a lot of Hispanic communities, that fable. But right here, they say that that's the river that I live next to, and that she goes along here. And the last one I have is this was something in my family. I had a great uncle who, when he was a boy, he wrote a date on the wall of the barn in chalk. Mm-hmm. And then when that date came, many years in the future, his mom died on that date. So just little things like that, you just think, is there truth to any of this stuff? And then you see little things, maybe massive coincidences. People remember them, and they don't remember all the other things that don't ever come to pass. But anyway, those are a few of the ones that I've heard about.
That is really cool. Thank you so much for that call, David. I really have wanted people to call in about that all of October, because I get in that mood where I want to hear about stuff like
Somebody
that.
called in on Sunday telling a story like that, and I was like, oh yeah, Bonnie was asking people to call in. You should call in on Wednesday.
I only asked like one day because I kept forgetting that I wanted to ask the callers too.
Yeah, and I forget what they were even talking about, but yeah, some of that stuff, like what he was talking about in the rubber room, like you wonder, like, if it's maybe like a poltergeist type entity rather than like
hitting
a ghost.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, with like the poltergeist, right? It's like a piece of like really strong, intense energy that breaks off of a person. Like, this is the theory, right? Whether you believe it or not is another story, but that's the theory of a poltergeist, right? Like, it is a piece of a living human being that breaks off of them and then kind of creates its own entity, right? And that's when it kind of gets destructive. And, according to whatever people, certain theories, since they are a piece of a living human being, they have free will, so to speak, where like other entities might not. So that's why they can kind of like knock things over. Like when you think of poltergeist, typically you're thinking of like, a cup knocking over or like things moving, because they can interact with their surroundings. So I wonder if it's something like that, making those noises, like just really like pent up
hate
in all this like energy, and all this intensity, rather than like someone, because I'm like, well, maybe like somebody died in there and it could be a ghost, but I feel like a lot of the experiences that people have, like they're more likely not like an actual ghost, but maybe some other sort of entity. I don't know.
Right. I totally
think it would be
believe
like
that.
a feedback loop.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Because you hear about that too, where someone
like an imprint.
Yeah, like somebody, like certain like mediums or people that have experiences, right? Like, or in certain areas, right, you'll have like this reoccurring experience where it's kind of just a ghost, like, or whatever, an entity.
It's replaying.
And it's constantly replaying. It's just like on a loop.
Yep. It could be all of those things at once, and I totally believe that a place like where he's describing would be the place that something like that would happen. I don't know, like, the history of I'm just gonna say La Llorona because I don't exactly know how to say it. Yes. Right. So I don't know exactly the history, like what places have what mystery or myth about her, but my ex, who is from southern Mexico, so pretty far away from where David lives in Arizona, I'm not going to tell his whole story because it's not really my story to tell, and it's really scary. Probably the scariest ghost story of any that I've ever been told by a person that I know. But when he was a kid, he had this really scary ghost thing happen to him and his brother at the same time. And while it was happening, he heard this loud scream in his ear, but it wasn't like in the room. And his brother right next to him in bed wasn't hearing it. And later when he was telling his grandma about it, she was like, oh, that's La Llorona.
Oh my gosh.
But it's good if it's loud because that means she's far away. If it's quiet, it actually means she's close. Yeah, so his was really loud. But she also used that same word. That's what he called it when he told me that story. So that's just kind of interesting that a whole bunch of
I don't like that. I don't know why that freaked me out so much.
I can tell you the whole thing.
I think whispering is scary. You know what I mean? So like if you're like already freaked out and then like something, if you hear a loud noise, that can be scary. But if something's like creepily whispering, like where are my children or something, like it's like
whispering and whistling. Those are the two off limits.
Too.
Don't do it. If it's dark and you do either of those, we can never talk again.
You guys should really watch Sam and Colby. They have captured so many creepy things like that, like whispers and whistles, and that is one of the creepier ones when you hear that on the camera and everybody in the frame is like, what was that? And it's a whistle. Like, that's so creepy. Why would a ghost even think to do that?
Or like children, like dead children are always like really creepy too. I don't know. It's just... it's like the innocence. It's like, I feel like you're a demon, like hiding in something innocent.
Pretending.
Yes, pretending.
I don't like that at all. And my sister also had a thing happen, and again, it's like not my story, but I don't think she'd be mad that I was telling it, where something was like running around her bed, and she woke up because she was like half asleep when that happened, and she's like, okay, that was creepy, I'm gonna go back to sleep. And when she got in that in between awake and asleep state again, she had it scream in her ear. Just like scream right in her face, and it woke her up and she didn't sleep the rest of the night.
See, I've never really had like experiences like that in my home. It's only ever been like I had weird experiences in that nursing home and then in the hospitals. Like it's always like places where it's like, well, yeah, I mean like people are dying here, and it's like, yeah, the worst moments of their entire life are happening here.
There's actually a phenomenon where you hear a noise like that while you're falling asleep. It's kind of like, when you're falling asleep and you have that like falling thing.
Yeah.
Yes,
or
that
you
happens
hear, like,
to
a
me all the
boom.
time.
It's like a misfire in your brain when it's between asleep and awake. So that might be what happened. And
hopefully.
It could be, but it could also be that you're in like a trance type state where you're more sensitive to things.
Yeah, like closer to the veil or whatever.
I had something happen to me, but I was wide awake.
So you want to tell it?
Yeah, sure. Well, the town I grew up in is an old town in Massachusetts, and when I was little, I liked somebody to stay in my bed with me. So I was at my aunt's house, and she was in bed next to me, and my sister was across the room in her bed, and we were watching something on TV. It was late at night, and I heard a man from downstairs call my name.
Oh my
And
gosh.
my aunt heard it too.
No.
My sister was asleep, so she didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
But they said, Lori. And I was like, oh, Uncle Tom is home, because my uncle would go away like all over the world for his work. And she's like, no, he's not. And I was like, Uncle Tom's home. And I got up and I ran downstairs,
And she's
and
like,
there was
"No, come
nobody
back."
there.
Oh,
there was nothing in the house, nobody there. So that one.
Yeah. I actually lied. There was things that used to happen to me at my like childhood house. But it was weird. Like, it's the type of thing where it's like, is this really happening? Am I imagining it? But
and
I would
when you're
always...
a kid, were you a kid?
Yes, weird things would happen to me. Like, I used to see fairies when I was falling asleep, because I would sleep in my parents' bed a lot when I was like 5 years old or whatever. I'd always go in there, and it'd be like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would see like fairies floating around. And to me, I'm just like, oh, I'm a little kid. Like, it's my imagination.
Or you think it's normal because how are you supposed to know it's not normal? Like, when I was a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
I would see jewels when I was falling asleep to the point where I'd be like, I'm bored falling asleep. Oh, I'm going to do that thing where I see jewels. And I could make it happen. And they would like move slowly and I could watch them.
Yeah, right. So it's like
But I didn't think it was that weird because.
No, yeah, it's like
not
not your imagination, but like kind of, right? Like your.
I just thought it was like an Easter egg fun thing you can do in this human life.
It's like your power of visualization, right? And it's easier to do things like that when you're a kid.
That could totally be it too.
But yeah, with that, like when I would think about it when I was an adult or like older, like after it was happening to me, I was like, oh yeah, whatever. Like just because I had imaginary friends too, but like my imaginary friends, I never saw them.
Right.
Yeah. So that I'm like, I don't know, was there fairies? Who knows? Maybe I was sleepy. Maybe I was dreaming. And then the other thing, in that same room, like in my parents' room a lot, which is weird because it was a new addition to the house. So nothing happened in that room, you know what I mean? And the whole house itself was built in the 90s, so it was a rather new house. But I would hear like my name being whispered. But again, that was the thing where you just kind of like, oh, whatever, I just imagined it or something, you know what I mean? Like you write stuff like that off, but that was happening. Like I would hear, you know, somebody calling my name or whispering my name.
That's
up until I was like a teenager living there, you know what I mean? And it wasn't like loud, like whispering, like it was kind of in my head almost. It's so weird to explain. So it was very easy for me, you know, like if you hear somebody say something, you're like, no, I know that was real, right? But this was kind of like, oh, maybe it was just my brain misfiring or something. Like, it was very easy for me to write it off. But again, who knows? Maybe someone was whispering my name. I don't know.
Right. Like I'm not saying like, oh, it can't be that their brain was misfiring or whatever, but I also think that could be like just your brain's in more of an ability to connect with things that we just don't use every single day anymore. Like we have, you know, like pineal gland in your brain that we don't use anymore. Like I think it used to be able to actually sense things that we can't sense anymore. And a lot of people have the same theory about the right temporal lobe. That it's basically what is credited with like your ability to have memory is your right temporal lobe, and it also has all these things that it doesn't use anymore. I guess like we just don't use that part of our brain anymore, or never did, quote unquote. And I don't know if I believe that. I think it's probably senses that we just don't use anymore. Like there are African people that have this theory that their ancestors used to be able to see all kinds of things that they couldn't see anymore as time went by. And they even said, don't take the vaccines the Europeans are bringing to us because it makes you blind from the spirits. Like you won't be able to see spirits and stuff. So,
I'm sure.
I just think that like, I don't know. It's possible that our brains used to be able to sense more things like in the spiritual realm than that.
Well, when you think about it, like think about how it was like 500 or more years ago before we had all this technology and stuff like that, and before we were so focused on working and making money and, you know, all of these tasks and, oh, you're bored, go watch TV. Oh, you're bored, go read a book. Before all of that, what were people doing? I mean, like, yeah, like it was making a meal and hunting and gardening, like all of those things took the majority of our time. But those people were so much more connected to nature, to their surroundings, and maybe to other things as well that we don't know about, to other entities, to spirits, to whatever you want to call it. Because they weren't so distracted by everything like nowadays, like you're bored, like you literally go watch a
Look
movie
at your phone.
or like you go, there's always something to do, and people don't allow themselves to be bored anymore, right? Like maybe being bored is a good thing because if you have absolutely nothing to do, you can just sit there and you can connect to whatever is there to connect to, or maybe, you know, like, you know how people talk about like downloads or your intuition or connecting to source, connecting to spirit, connecting to God. I think when you're in those places of stillness, nowadays we call it meditation, right? But I'm sure people, you know, before, you know, like thousands of years ago, this was their existence, right? Like this was, you know, they did this quite a lot where you're just sitting there doing nothing.
Waiting for a deer to walk by.
Yeah, or just like looking off into the horizon, like whatever you're doing, you didn't have anything to do, so you would just relax, rest. But now we have a name for it. Right now we call it meditation, but that used to just be something that people did.
Or mindfulness.
Yeah,
self-care.
That's, right. Like that's when you would receive like ideas, right? Oh, right. I'm gonna do this. Like that is when people received that sort of information. And we definitely, people don't even have time to do that nowadays.
So your brain can only pay attention to so many things at once.
Yeah.
That's why sometimes you'll see something out of the corner of your eye because your brain's filling in that information.
Yeah.
So if you think about that too, we constantly have lights and objects and TVs, monitors and sounds and just constant input. And so even if there was something subtle, maybe you just can't pay attention to it anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's so much input that your brain's like, I can't with that.
Yeah. And that's another reason, like we always talk about babies and young children being closer to the veil. And that's why maybe, young children have more paranormal experiences. And same with animals, right? But maybe that's because they don't have as much input. So you just leave the baby, in the crib or whatever, and they're just like staring, like looking around.
And they haven't been taught. They haven't learned.
Exactly. They don't know that it's not real yet, right?
Or normal.
Yeah, exactly. So like maybe that's another reason why young children have those experiences is because, unless you have some people, like I'm sure, have all the fancy baby toys and, we're going to put the tablet on for the 2-year-old to go to sleep, like things that are totally unnecessary. But for normal people who don't do that to their children and just have their children existing, looking around at things, I'm sure they are so much more open to receiving stuff like that because they don't have all of the constant input that adults do.
Yep, I definitely see that to be a possibility. I haven't had any of those where I just see something in the corner of my eye or even really any like ghost thing appearing in my house at all, but my mom and my grandma and my brother all have a lot, not just in the corner of their eyes, like that has definitely happened, but my mom has seen with her eyes open, wide awake, like really creepy things. Like I keep feeling bad, like I said, not my story to tell, but since she told me it, I'm just going to say it. She said before, the one that scared me more than anything else, I don't know why she told me that she saw this as a kid, but I guess she just wanted to tell someone. But she saw this woman standing in her doorway that looked like she had been underwater for like a really long time and was dead and decaying, just staring at her. When my dad woke up to go take a shower to get ready for work, it woke her up and she like felt like she was being watched and she looked out.
That's horrifying.
That's terrifying.
And that's the thing too, like, I don't want to see any of this stuff. Like,
exactly.
I don't want these experiences. I'm already kind of like, it's easy for me to get kind of spooked and scared. Like if I'm watching something creepy on my phone, and especially if it's nighttime, forget about it. Then I will be like creeped out. Somebody even told me a story at work about like, oh yeah, there's a ghost here. And at first I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm not really afraid of that, and I believe you, whatever. But for like weeks after, I would like, it did like have like a residual creepy effect for me where like I would, see a reflection on a window or something and get scared or spooked or, so I don't really want to wake up and see somebody in my doorway. Like I don't want to see any of that. I don't want to see it.
And it's like, there are people that's just totally normal for them. They've been seeing creepy things.
How do you survive? Like, how do you move on? How do you see something like even just the story you just said?
Right.
How do you see something like that and then like
move on? Yeah.
How do you move on from that? Like,
seriously,
I don't know. Like, like mediums who like experience this stuff all the time, or like how you're talking about Sam and Colby, how they go out and they're like searching for these experiences and they're going to haunted houses. How do you, like, literally, how do you move on after that? Like, I guess you have to, right? Because what else are you going to do? But like, that is super creepy.
And I think part of not wanting it is one reason, a huge reason why like I personally don't see things like that. I just don't want to, but I would love to hear more paranormal experiences from callers, but whatever you want to talk about is fine. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
Later in the hour, the U.S. Postal Service announces that you can deliver the mail yourself if you think it's so easy. But first up in health news, researchers from Harvard University have found a strong link between male virility and wearing Motley Crue denim jackets. For the study, researchers paired fans of the band with a control group and found that those wearing Motley Crue attire were far more likely to knock out some chick's totally jacked boyfriend and then do it with her later that same day than those who simply wore casual clothes and probably wouldn't know what it feels like to have 2 threesomes in one night.
Men who own jackets with an image of Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx sitting on top of a pair of breasts with nipples in the shape of pentagrams showed higher levels of sexual potency, endurance, and libido. These guys do it all the time, and sometimes even in public. They don't care.
Although the study primarily focused on men in Motley Crue jackets, researchers also found that men who listened to Nirvana had a high likelihood of staying virgins forever.
This is the Onion News Network.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. Thousands of people remain in Gaza at the Rafah border point, hoping to cross over into Egypt. Earlier, around 400 people were able to leave as Egypt opened up the crossing for the first time since fighting began more than 3 weeks ago. FSN's Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv reports that a UN official managed to cross in the other direction and enter Gaza. Interest rates in the United States will remain on hold after the Federal Reserve decided not to raise them from their 22-year high. FSN's Benji Heyer reports.
No change, a pause again by officials in the nation's capital. Following 11 straight rises from March of last year, interest rates will stay between 5.25 and 5.5%, where they've been since July 2023. The Federal Open Market Committee waiting to see if its strategy to contain inflation is working before it considers tightening monetary policy even more. Its unanimous decision to maintain current rates coming at a delicate time for the US economy and global financial markets. War in the Middle East, warnings of renewed oil price volatility, and a recent bond market sell-off, all complicating the outlook.
U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to meet China's President Xi Jinping later this month in California, according to the White House. FSN's U.S. correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
The White House has said that President Biden is expected to have a tough conversation with President Xi, saying that the intense competition between the two countries requires intense diplomacy and that US policy towards China has not changed. It's said, though, that the logistical details of this meeting were still being put together, but that it was planning for a constructive conversation. The high-stakes face-to-face meeting comes as the White House is navigating major wars in Ukraine and Israel, and that is putting additional pressure on an already strained US-China relationship, which has been damaged in recent years by a trade war that began during the Trump administration.
And in U.S. markets, the Dow was up 0.7%, the S&P 500 rose 1%, and the Nasdaq led the way, up 1.6%. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the case against a ceasefire in Gaza. Calls for one are growing by the hour in many Western capitals as Israel's ground offensive continues. And in Washington on Tuesday, congressional testimony by Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was interrupted by protesters excoriating the Biden administration for failing to call for a ceasefire. But in the US and Europe, many political leaders are reluctantly overtly to demand a cessation of hostilities. Former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott with his explanation of why.
Israel has every right to take all reasonable steps to destroy Hamas. The difference between Hamas, which deliberately targeted civilians, and Israel is that Israel will do everything it can to avoid civilian casualties. But when you are in a situation of total war, civilian casualties can't entirely be avoided, particularly when Hamas is using civilian Palestinians as human shields. So to call for a ceasefire is effectively to render Israel impotent in its necessary and justified campaign against Hamas.
That argument, of course, is rejected by, among others, the UN Secretary-General. Antonio Guterres continues to press the case for a ceasefire, saying Palestinian civilians are getting needlessly killed in Israel's war on Hamas. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. Thousands in Gaza gather at the border crossing to Egypt, which opened the border to some for the first time since fighting began more than 3 weeks ago. Interest rates in the U.S. will remain on hold after the Federal Reserve decides not to raise them from their 22-year high. And the White House confirms that Joe Biden is expected to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. That is the latest. Feature Story News, Ira Spitzer reporting.
They started with Google Glass, and now the engineers behind Google have created a new body part to strap gadgets onto. They're calling it the flange, and the new synthetic skin appendage fits between the shoulder blades into a flat surface capable of holding a wide array of new gadgets for Google to hawk to consumers. While unveiling the innovation today, Google CEO Larry Page said, quote, "The possibilities for the number of completely pointless gadgets to strap, bind, and stick to your body are now endless." Early adopters are already raving about the synthetic body part.
It overheats and burns my skin pretty bad when I have it on, but I'm really getting to like it.
I'm actually thinking of getting a second one installed.
Critics are cautioning the tech world to not hail the flange as an achievement yet, since several users have reported problems with the device permanently grafting to their spinal column if worn overnight. Coming up next, Doritos unveils new e-Doritos that come in JPEG form whenever you're hungry.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. It's talk radio that you control. 603-283-6160 is the phone number for you to call to get in on the conversation with us. That is 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live, and with you in the studio tonight, it's me, Bonnie,
Lori, and Nikki.
And I want to go right into your phone calls and thoughts. We have Ross. Ross, I didn't call or ask you where you're calling from tonight.
Yeah, hi, my name's Ross. I'm calling from Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Okay, and what did you have on your mind tonight to share with us, Ross?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. I love you guys. I listen nightly. In terms of what you're talking about, in terms of supernatural experiences, working in like long-term care facilities and/or hospitals, I can weigh in on this, especially in the spirit of what was now past Halloween. But yeah, I work in one of the the site of the second oldest hospital in the United States.
Wow, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, the original building still exists, and it was the Alms House of Lancaster County, and it was built in 1799.
Oh, I want to look that up. What is it? How do you spell the Alms House?
Yeah, Alms, ALMS. It was the poorhouse, basically, for the entire county. And rumor has it, it was first and foremost built upon like a native burial ground, which is kind of creepy in and of itself. But then over the years, it became also a potter's field, like nameless people, the crazies and whatnot, would be entered into there. And when they died, they would just kind of like put them in unmarked graves.
Yeah.
So what happened was in 1968, they decided to modernize the facility, and they built a much larger building, which is like 8 stories high.
Wow.
Adjacent to the existing structure, which still stands, and it's in beautiful shape. So recent events, they started doing some renovations on the 8th floor, which would be the apex of the building.
That's huge.
And
8 floors.
I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for 16 years, and there are some creepy energies, like, you know, vibing around the place. The county morgue is in the basement, what used to be the county morgue. So, like, the coroner's office used to be down there as well. So this place is, like, full of weird energy.
Yeah.
So what they're reporting on the 8th floor of this building, some of my fellow nurses have come down from night shift and questioned other night shift nurses, and they're like, yeah, you got stories? So there's this male entity that's been like creeping around the 8th floor since the renovation started, and we have alert and oriented residents reporting seeing this guy always at night, always in the dark room. And the one guy was just like leaning over to put his prosthesis on to get himself to the bathroom. All of a sudden, this male figure appears out of nowhere, kind of shadowy, and it's just like, bad idea. Literally put his hands on the patient's shoulder and kind of pushed him back into bed and said, ring for help.
Whoa.
What? He touched him? Because normally you don't hear about like entities touching
He
people.
said there was actual physical contact.
Wow.
He was like, okay, so this gets creepier.
Oh, that's
Then
dark.
there was this woman. Yeah, it's pretty wild. There was this woman who just woke up, and she's in these are 4-bed rooms, and her room was pretty much vacant except for her. She woke up in the middle of the night, and there was just a dude sitting there on one of the adjacent beds, like cross-legged, just sitting there, and he goes, this used to be a male occupancy only room. When did they change it to female? And she just kind of went back to sleep. Like,
whoa.
And then there was another guy who was helping himself to the bathroom, and the same figure came in and kind of helped him out, and then turned on his call light so another staff member could come in.
Wait. So I just want to make sure I understand what you said. You said that the entity helped him to the bathroom?
The shadowy figure observed him, kind of like walked with him.
So
okay, but kind of like a nurse would, right? Like I'm walking with you, like
Exactly.
helping you to the bathroom. Yeah. That's weird.
Maybe he used to be a nurse
So,
there.
yeah, this is the fun thing.
Oh.
Because the creepy part of it, this has been going on for weeks. These stories keep happening. And the one night shift nurse had all these interesting complaints from these 3 residents that were working up there, all of whom are alert and oriented. And they all described the same experience. And they asked her, like, who was the guy, like, on staff that night? And she looked at the staffing roster. There were no male staff on duty that night.
Wow. I bet he used to be
Kind
a
of wild.
nurse.
Yeah, that's really weird. I mean, it could be anything, right? But you usually don't hear about entities like making physical contact with
Usually
people,
they're,
and
like,
that's
bad,
why
like they
it's
scratch people.
That
if
was
they
the
do.
wild thing.
And he
yeah.
doesn't
Yeah,
seem
it's
bad.
just like they all described these similar things. Like, it was a guy, and he was like probably neither young nor old. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think on some level, like, energy just lingers in these buildings,
Yeah.
especially in one that's that old, because, like, if you consider that the site built on what it was since 1799, and I've been there for 16 years. I've seen hundreds of people die, so they gotta haunt the walls. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That is
So,
really crazy.
yeah.
Thank you so much for
I
sharing
had to
that.
call. Yeah, I just had to call. I love you guys. I listen nightly, like I said.
Thank you
So-
so
Oh,
much.
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you
I
so
really
much. I'm so
appreciate
glad you
that.
called. Yeah, and that was a really
Yeah.
interesting story, too. And it makes me it just reminds me of similar experiences I had in the hospital that I worked at. Actually, I don't want to say that I had stories that I heard from other staff members
right.
of the highest. We only had 4 floors, but of the 4th floor. So there was just like a lot of like weird similarities where we would have completely young, alert and oriented patients. So it's not like this is like a dementia patient or somebody that's on a ton of pain meds and they're confused. This would just be like a normal like 25-year-old kid or 30-year-old person that's completely alert and oriented that would, you know, have all of these strange experiences, or they'd be really creeped out. We've had things like fly, like the syringes of just like normal saline, like sterile fluid. We've had syringes like fly across the room, and it was in these 2 particular rooms, like way in the back. The call lights would go off. I know it was a vacant unit because we didn't have enough staff to staff it. And I was a CNA at the time. So the nurses sent me up to the 4th floor to get like telemeters and like just whatever, like stuff for the patients. So essentially, like I went up with my little cart and I was going to fill up, like jack all the supplies from up there. In the second I got off the elevator, I just had a creepy feeling, and it was like something was telling me to like turn around and go back to where you belong. But I'm like, I can't come back empty-handed. So like, I got to go, get my supplies. So I go all the way down to get my supplies. And it was just real creepy. But other nurses had told me experiences that they had where bed alarms would go off, chair alarms would go off, like all sorts of stuff. And if you don't know how those work, you need to apply pressure to it and then lift up. And that's how the alarms work. Either that or maybe some sort of like electrical malfunction. But that's really weird for like all of them to have an electrical malfunction.
Yeah.
But yeah, nurses have told me before, like on the night shift where like alarms would be going off and it was almost like something was saying like, get out of here. You're not welcome here. This is my area. Leave. And it would just be like really scary.
It's so creepy.
So after that, I was like, I'm never doing this ever again. Like somebody else can go up there. And nothing weird even happened to me. Nothing flew. Like it was just like this overwhelmingly negative, scary sensation of like, I'm not welcome here. And like,
it's weird because like people used to describe that and I wouldn't really know what they meant by like, oh, that feeling of being watched or being unwelcome
feeling of
to,
dread.
And dread. But it happened to my sister and I when we were walking through the woods before. We suddenly got this feeling that like we were not welcome. It was a bad idea to be there. And I was like, I think we should run. I don't even remember the exact conversation, but I was like, I think we should run. And we had my dogs with us, or my dog that I have now and her dog that she had then. And I went to run and I fell and both of my shoes were untied. And we were like shocked because we had been hiking. Like I'd been looking at my feet, moving around in like not a like, oh, this is a trail, you walk the trail. Like we were off a trail just in this mountain that was by where I lived in Utah. And so like I felt both my shoes were untied. And I'm like shocked for a second and my sister's laughing at me. And then all I could do was point at her. I couldn't say anything because I had like kind of had the air knocked out of me. Both of her shoes were untied too.
What?
And we just got
weird.
The heck out of there as fast
and it's like,
as possible.
what's the odds of both of your shoes being untied? And then what's the odds of also both of her shoes being untied?
Right.
Like, that's crazy.
It's like we had to have been looking at our shoes throughout this whole time. But yeah, the story that Ross called in and told, it's interesting because there was renovations going on, which I've heard of those, waking up ghosts in old buildings, and it's like right before
like almost like maybe
Halloween.
they're stored in the walls or something. Like the energy is stored like in the physical building.
Right.
Because now that I think about it, so the 4th floor was closed just because we didn't have staff. But there were also renovations other areas of the building. So I don't know if it's just there's so much stuff you don't know.
And it was right before Halloween. Like he said, it's been the last few weeks and
that's weird.
Whatnot. So it's like the veil getting thin on that day is what people say. Well, let's move on to another caller. We have an unscreened caller. What's on your mind? Are you there?
Yeah, it's Tom. I'm just bringing up another issue here. There's an imaginary right that kind of applies that the government respects for some people. Supposedly everyone is equal under the law. But it seems that if you can afford a house on a quiet side street, then you have a right to peace and quiet during certain hours of the day. There are streets here in Hudson where its trucks are prohibited 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. No trucks allowed because, the people living on that street, they're entitled to some peace and quiet if they're day shift workers trying to sleep at night. But of course, night shift workers trying to sleep in the daytime, they're not entitled to that.
That's
weird. If it's if you have a house on a quiet side street, you can get a lot more money for it because it's on a quiet side street rather than if it was on a busy, noisy street. But it's not only expected that you're going to have less noise, but the government will deploy gun-toting goons in bulletproof vests to prevent somebody from opening a factory at the dead end of that dead-end street because, oh my gosh, people would be driving up and down a public street. Like there's something terrible. You never catch the neighbors doing that, now would you? But they protect this right to peace and quiet for rich people, but then people who can't afford a house on a quiet side street, then it's okay to, shall we say, attack them with a lot of noise.
One thing about it, I don't really know any of the laws he's talking about or anything like that. It's an interesting idea that the government is kind of synthetically, that's not the word I'm looking for, but unnaturally, inorganically creating houses that would be worth more and worth less based on the situations they're setting up with their laws for these public roads. It is kind of weird. Doesn't seem like a very good thing. But one thing it makes me think of is I feel like it's my responsibility for me to be able to make it to where I can sleep in my house because, like, if my neighbors are have to wake up at a different hour than me, and I happen to live in a duplex. I really do. So I live in a duplex. If my neighbors are up at a different time than me, and I'm sleeping later into the afternoon or something like that, because I always work late, I don't feel like I should be able to make them be quiet. What I do is I listen to a fan noise, and nothing can wake me up. Nothing can wake me up when I have the fan noise just playing on my phone from YouTube right next to my head. I mean, it's free, and it blocks all noise. Like, I don't know what kind of noise would have to be. It would have to be like a helicopter like floating above my house or something to actually wake me up from this fan noise. So
there are lots of laws though that are not really laws for people if they have enough money.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything punishable by a fine is legal for a certain amount.
Right. That's so true. Well, I don't really know the law he's talking about, and he kind of rambles. So, David in New Mexico, what's on your mind, David?
La Llorona.
Oh my God.
Did you call for La Llorona, cabron?
I didn't call for one. It's terrifying.
Oh, okay. Well, oh well.
Do you have any scary stories, David?
Yeah, I got a real life scary story. I got a lot of them. But first of all, you're talking about the old almost for the poor, almost for the poor. I think that's a line out of some movie, probably Monty Python. But that we used to do two things. One, let's see, you're talking about the hospital, and I worked at the University of Minnesota Teaching Hospital for a couple of years, and I was trying to decide if I wanted to go to medical school, and I decided hell no, and I ended up with a girlfriend who was also working at the hospital, and she showed me the old. There was like, they kept building this thing, it was like 1860, 1880, 1930, they kept adding on. So she showed me the old operating room that was last used in like 1950s, and it was intact. It had the operating room theater above it, with all the seating above it, and the old stainless steel operating table, all the tools.
That's cool. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, it's creepy.
It was creepy, yeah. It was intact, and so she showed that to me. And then one day at work, we both worked at the same time. She got horny.
Oh my God! Can you say that on the radio?
Yeah.
Well, he did. So yeah,
you can say that word. Yeah, I didn't tell you anything else. I just said, and so your kinky little imaginations can figure out the rest of it.
All right.
So that's not a scary story. Maybe scary
in the operating
I don't want to think
room.
about it with you. But
Think about how many people died on that table, died in that room. Oh my God!
Thank you for the call, David. Well, did you have more?
Huh?
Sorry, did you have more?
Yeah, I want to hear the rest of the story.
There's more to that story.
Well, there's more to that story, but I'm telling you the rest. That's private, you kinky little devil.
Right.
So, yeah. So
I thought there
another
was going to
story-
be like a punchline or something, like, you know, whatever, something scary happened in the room or
Someone
something.
grabbed my foot.
I think getting busy on an operating table in an operating theater with all of the adornments from 1950s.
Yeah, I guess that's enough, right?
I don't think that counts as a
Yeah.
paranormal experience.
Yeah, that was it was divine. Yes, it was
Okay.
heavenly.
All right. Well, thank you for the call, David. I'm pretty sure that was the rest
Bonnie's had enough of that. She's like, you're done.
I don't like that word. Like, seriously, it's my least favorite word.
Really?
It's a gross word. There needs to be a new one. I don't like it. Yes, Captain just is asking me if that's the word I mean, and it is. What about moist? Ew, no. It's terrible.
Randy.
Randy.
Yeah,
Oh my
Randy.
God.
That's much better, yeah.
I knew a woman named Randy, and like that's a terrible thing to name your daughter. It's like Randy with an I, so it's a girl name.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's like what country people do.
It's like what country people do.
She was from Tennessee, and her name was Randy.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about her today because she used to be my boss. I don't know why I would tell the radio all this whole story, but she used to be my boss when I cleaned houses. And I was thinking about her today and what a bad person she is. So I don't even really feel bad for making fun of her name on the radio. But I think that that's all that we have about the David story. But I don't know. Were you going to tell another story, but did you want to say it on the air? Or if not, I think we could move on. From the paranormal conversations. It's been really fun. I'm glad that people called in with their experiences, especially Ross, especially since it's your first call and you've been a long time listener. That's really
That's awesome. I
super
love like first call, long time listeners.
Right, me too. It's always like, wow, it's so crazy to think who's like out there listening to us.
Yeah.
When it's the first time
Sometimes
you've
I
heard of them.
forget that people listen to this show.
Seriously.
I just feel like we're just like hanging out.
Exactly.
And
I feel the exact same
Are we
way.
not?
Yeah.
Oh no.
We all
Like, wait, people
just
are
hanging
listening
out.
to us?
But people are also listening to us just hang out. Oh, and we had lost her, but Sarah in New Mexico, you're back. Sarah, what's on your mind?
Hello, am I on?
Yep, you are.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know I got on so fast. I just want to say that, they finally put the city councilors, all that's running, like, on the TV, and then we only have like 4 days of voting left. It's the most stupidest thing that they have done.
I thought you can't vote for them, right?
No, I cannot.
Yeah, you're one of
But,
the odd numbers or even numbers or whatever
Right,
it was.
but I've seen 3 candidates. It's kind of interesting. I've seen 3 candidates in District 2 last night, and I saw 2 of them in District 8. And this is the first time that they put the city councilors on the TV news ever.
Maybe more people
'Cause,
have an internet like to find these things out now.
Well, that's what, but they're actually on the television news. That they're supposed to do your own research. They tell you to go to this website, but I guess people wanted them. They wanted them to see on TV. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So they finally got put them on. Then we only have like 4 days left to vote or something.
So do you have a theory? Like, is this like a conspiracy? Like, are they trying to keep people from knowing the city council candidates?
Well, I'm just happy that they have any kind of city councilors on at all. I've lived here for 23 years. They've never had city councilors talk about what they want to do on TV at all. So I'm just really happy that they started to do that, because they always like, oh, it's only 4 seats for politicians. You go look it up yourself on the internet. You go find out who they are, But I just think that I was standing in I think my running around like a crazy person with a 243 vote sign has helped to fuel this. A lot of people are interested.
Well, I'm glad you're excited, Sarah. And it seems like there's lots of things that happen that Sarah believes were because of her. Like all this
Yeah.
time, it was all because she was carrying this sign or whatever it is. But maybe she's right. I would look stupid if she's right. And and in our afterlife, God comes and reveals to me that Sarah
in New Mexico was right about everything.
Right about everything. So who am I to say? But Yeah, I don't have much to say about that topic that she brought in. She has her city council.
I honestly
the news.
can't even express how much I don't care
I know,
about that.
I hate to say it, but I'm happy that Sarah's happy.
Yeah,
that she's.
I'm
excited
happy
about
for
it.
her, I guess.
Did we basically get through everything that you had to say about the story that basically we were talking about an hour ago at this point, that was about the surveillance state, that the UN wants to have 50 countries in 5 years in on their little scheme to surveil people?
There's some other things, like they say it's imperative to have everyone have a digital ID.
Okay, we'll
Yeah,
talk
no
about
thanks.
what
Not a
that
fan.
means coming up. I'm not a fan of that either. I don't even want the real ID. 603-283-6160. Would you sign up for the digital infrastructure and ID systems? It's Free Talk Live, and more is coming up.
Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here, and I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com.
Feature Story News in San Francisco. I'm Ira Spitzer. Thousands of people remain in Gaza at the Rafah border point, hoping to cross over into Egypt. Earlier, around 400 people were able to leave as Egypt opened up the crossing for the first time since fighting began more than 3 weeks ago. FSN's Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv reports that a UN official managed to cross in the other direction and enter Gaza. Interest rates in the United States will remain on hold after the Federal Reserve decided not to raise them from their 22-year high. FSN's Benji Heyer reports.
No change, a pause again by officials in the nation's capital. Following 11 straight rises from March of last year, interest rates will stay between 5.25 and 5.5%, where they've been since July 2023. The Federal Open Market Committee waiting to see if its strategy to contain inflation is working before it considers tightening monetary policy even more. Its unanimous decision to maintain current rates coming at a delicate time for the US economy and global financial markets. War in the Middle East, warnings of renewed oil price volatility, and a recent bond market sell-off, all complicating the outlook.
U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to meet China's President Xi Jinping later this month in California, according to the White House. FSN's U.S. correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
The White House has said that President Biden is expected to have a tough conversation with President Xi, saying that the intense competition between the two countries requires intense diplomacy and that US policy towards China has not changed. It's said, though, that the logistical details of this meeting were still being put together, but that it was planning for a constructive conversation. The high-stakes face-to-face meeting comes as the White House is navigating major wars in Ukraine and Israel, and that is putting additional pressure on an already strained US-China relationship, which has been damaged in recent years by a trade war that began during the Trump administration.
And in U.S. markets, the Dow was up 0.7%, the S&P 500 rose 1%, and the Nasdaq led the way, up 1.6%. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. It's talk radio that you control. 603-283-6160 is the phone number to get in on this last segment with us. We've been having a really fun conversation here tonight about all kinds of different things like the governments and laws and, war crimes and surveillance state, and then even people's personal paranormal experiences, which was really fun for me. I kind of wanted people to do that all October, but I don't care if it's late. Like I'm always in a mood to talk about that kind of stuff. Like it's interesting to me. But it's even more, for some reason, just amplified and more fun during Halloween season or like October. But yeah, we've been talking also about something that's equally as spooky. The UN wanting to get 50 countries in 5 years to join their surveillance state ramp up, basically. And so one thing that Lori was telling us before the break was that they want people to get in on this digital ID thing. But before we get into that, I would like to thank Brian, who's a silver level amplifier. And if you don't know what an amplifier is, that's someone who helps amplify, market, and promote and support the show. So if you would like to learn more about that, it's AMPS, Amplify, Market, Promote, and Support. amps.freetalklive.com is where you can go to find out more. That's amps.freetalklive.com. And thank you so much to Brian, who's a silver level amplifier. That means that he gives $5 a month, and you get some different perks for becoming an amplifier, and you can learn more about that at amps.freetalklive.com. But with you in the studio tonight, it's me, Bonnie,
Lori,
and Nikki.
And Lori was telling us more about this digital ID idea.
Again, this is sociable.co. So they go on to say the 50 in 5 campaign is a collaboration between the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the United Nations Development Program, the Digital Public Goods Alliance, and Co-Develop. Co-Develop was founded by the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Nalkani Philanthropies, and the Omadar Network.
I only know the first two.
Me too. The Digital Public Goods Alliance lists both the Gates and Rockefeller Foundations in its roadmap showcasing activities that advance digital public goods along with other organizations and several governments. People-centered smart cities need accessible, secure, and fair digital public infrastructure that powers digital services and ensures everyone has equal opportunity to fully participate in civic life.
That is bad woke language when they're just trying to make you feel like we're on the side of people. It's people-centered. Right. Like it's gotten to a point where they have to try to convince us that they like people. They're definitely lizard people.
That's from the United Nations Building and Securing Digital Public Infrastructure Playbook from June 2022. The United Nations Playbook on Digital Public Infrastructure says that digital ID is foundational to DPI, stating, broadly, there are 3 major types of protocols that facilitate digital public infrastructure: digital identity, digital payments, and data exchange. These 3 protocols are typically required for most digital service transactions, such as permitting, issuing licenses, or providing records that often require validating a user's identity, enabling exchange of data across agencies and users, and finally authorizing payments online. By prioritizing these 3 protocols, the UN says that local governments can set the stage for successful development of an entire ecosystem of digital services in alignment with their community's unique needs.
The main thing that this makes me think is you shouldn't ever let them tell you what you need. Like, I don't go around needing digital payments that are tracked by the government. Like, I was trading silver with a friend recently. I was paid in silver for something, is what I mean. I don't need the government to know about that. I mean, I guess I just told them because the FBI listens to the show, but it wasn't necessary.
Right, like it doesn't need to be reported, right? You know what I mean?
And it's not like it needed to be digital. I don't think that most people would agree that we quote unquote need to get rid of cash. Like, oh, well, there's credit cards now. Yeah, there are credit cards, but don't you like being able to just give the boy in the neighborhood some cash to mow your lawn instead of having to report it and then he has to get taxed and just the government knowing at all about it?
Right, or even knowing what I'm buying. What if I'm buying something embarrassing at the store and I don't want anyone to know? Why do I want that on my records?
Yeah.
I've never needed to verify my identity online for anything. I don't need a digital ID.
Yep. And it's like when you don't grow up with people who really think much about this, the surveillance state getting worse and worse. I didn't grow up with my parents being like, Chris Wade, who is a former host on the show, and a friend of ours, he's all about privacy. He sells VPNs for a living. And I kind of asked him one time early on in the show when I was first doing the show and I was on an episode with him and Captain, I asked him, why is it that you don't want the government to know, like, why wouldn't you want them to know what you're buying? Like, just what? I didn't grow up thinking like this, so I asked such a simple question like that, and he said, well, for example, the government can use, like, if there was a murder in the, like, neighborhood you're in, they can, like, pull up Home Depot receipts and find people that have bought hammers that day and literally will arrest people without due process for things like buying something similar to what somebody might have been killed with, like in the surrounding area of what they're in that day. I was like, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, you wouldn't think about that, right? But that's real. Or there was one murder where they were looking for a suspect for something. So they used like Apple, like iPhone tracking, or maybe all phone tracking. I don't know. But they used that to see who was in the area of said crime.
Well, even data is the thing that you're using to pay all these free online services.
Right.
So why, if it's profitable for somebody, should I be forced by the government to give it to them for free? Yeah. I'm not a commodity of the government. I'm a human being.
Right. Like your information is what they want. That's why they do free games.
Right.
Or weird little things. Like, one thing I've heard is data mining that is so weird. I've like lost what I was about to say because I said data when I usually say data, but I've heard that this is data mining. Whenever you see on Facebook a post that'll be like, what was your childhood, what was your mom's maiden name, and everybody's commenting it.
What's your social security number?
Right. Yeah.
Find out what Pokemon you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and those really
crazy.
are apparently data mining things sometimes.
Yeah, it is. I'm sure it is. It's weird.
People just give their data away for free.
Right.
They voluntarily pay to give it away, like in 23andMe. And insurance companies are now buying that data.
I actually, this morning, I had a patient come up to me because I think she was watching the news. And she came up to me all flustered and she was like, oh my gosh, I just heard that one of the DNA things had a data breach where they found like everyone's name, their address, their gender, and like a bunch of personal information. And she was really worried. She's like, I just got that done. Me and my daughters got that done because I have some sort of heart defect thing. So they were getting it done to see if they had the genetic trait for it or whatever, if they had, the genes for it. And so she was all freaked out. And she was like, I didn't even know this was possible. Like, and it's just unfortunate. She's like, we were just trying to do a good thing to see if they were going to get what I have or pass it on to their children. And now, like, all of our personal, like, she was really freaked out about it. And I'm like, I don't blame you. Like, just this random hacker knowing your name and your address enough, never mind like all of your personal health information and all this other stuff. You know what I mean?
It's just a weird thing to me that people do all this testing to find out. Like, my sister used to be obsessed and was telling me, before you get married, you need to take this test that'll tell you like what things our parents have passed down to us. So that way you don't marry somebody who has the same ones, and then you and your kid might end up giving your kids that. I was like, I wouldn't marry someone based on like how pure our kids' genes were going to be.
Yeah.
I would marry them based
It is
on
weird.
loving them. But people do that.
I think, but I think that so many people like blame their bad health on bad genetics. And once you start studying epigenetics and like realizing like, no, there are things you can do to turn these genes on or off. Like this isn't a death sentence. Just because your dad had diabetes doesn't mean like, yeah, you might be predisposed
more likely
for that.
right.
But how about you stop eating sugar and carbs and like then you won't get those things. So like there's always things people can do to like better there's things you can do literally while you're pregnant to better your child's chances to be healthy when they're born. And then like all of these things you can do when they're a very young child to like help them be healthier. And then they have to make those decisions as an adult. So like these things aren't just like a life sentence. So like people get really obsessed with that. And I feel like it also kind of like manifests it, right? So like there's a lot of like
if you're like I
genetic
know that I'm
testing.
Predisposed to get this.
Like you're
I'm totally
thinking about
gonna
it.
Get it.
You know what I mean? Like, and you become like obsessed with it. And I totally think that you can like unintentionally like call those things into your life.
There's so many weird little freak things that happen during pregnancy anyway that can go wrong that you'd never know through testing. So to say, oh, you don't marry somebody on the off chance you might pass something down to your kids when just random happenstance could happen.
Yeah,
your kids come out with something anyway.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no way to, and there's so many things you don't know. You know what I mean?
I told her that was like kind of Hitler of her too. It's like what like everybody needs to be like finding.
What
only
is that
breeding
called?
With the
eugenics.
Final solution. Oh yeah, eugenics. That's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah,
there are some things like what is it called? Fatal familial insomnia. You probably shouldn't have kids.
What is that?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, so one day you just never go to sleep again and you die.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Oh my gosh.
And it's genetic, and so
don't reproduce if
don't
you have
reproduce
that.
if you have that. Like if you have something like that, maybe don't. But
I didn't know back then that I like definitely wasn't going to reproduce anyway. But now I definitely am not going to reproduce anyway. But I just wouldn't have married anyone based on. I wouldn't have broke up with someone that I was like in love enough to marry and have kids with just based on we got these test results back.
Yeah.
There's so many different factors. And like there's so many like if a woman's over 35, you know, like you have all these risk factors. And then also like if a man, like if your partner, if the male, you know, part of the whatever reproduction, if they are older, like there's also certain things, but like there's also the possibility that none of that stuff could happen and you could have a perfectly healthy, normal baby. Actually, and then like two like teenagers could have a baby and their kid could have a bunch of birth defects. So it's like there's really there's so many unknowns. It's like you can't really control that stuff. And it's like I think when we try to play God and like try to control things a little too much, things go awry.
And then there's all the garbage DNA they say people have.
Oh yeah, you don't need it anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything. Like,
Yeah,
I'm sure
sure.
it's just there for no reason at all.
I don't believe that at all. And it's like majority of your DNA information is quote garbage DNA. And I think that has a lot to do with the epigenetic stuff that Nikki's talking about. Is like you can turn on things that you didn't know were even there. And maybe there was things that we used to be able to access that we can't access anymore. Basically turning the whole conversation back to what we were talking about earlier. It's like one thing I wanted to bring up back then when we were talking about that is the people in like Ireland who would talk about like the Celtic people who would talk about, oh yeah, I totally saw a gnome. And maybe not a gnome, like that's
Fairies.
how they would have called it. But
fae.
So many of them would talk about, there's historical accounts of so many people from like that area and also other areas, but that area was like huge. Just like it was everyday normal life. Yeah, like I was walking down the street and I saw XYZ fairy type thing. Why would they all be crazy? Why would they all be lying? You know, why would they all... I think that people just used to be able to perceive things that we can't now that are probably like something...
It's kind
attached
of
to
crazy
nature.
to like write off thousands of people as just being crazy. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's
Or
like
just
no,
they were, it's a
you're just
different time.
confused. Every single one of you was mistaken.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, sure.
I think times have just changed and we just, you know, we don't have the ability to see those things anymore. Use our junk DNA for what it was used for, do different things with our bodies where, like, I don't know, maybe it's true that there used to be a lot fewer cases of things like cancer and autoimmune diseases because of the fact that people were more in tune with their bodies And, if
or
something's
because
going
there
wrong,
wasn't
they'd know.
so much like toxins and pollutants. You know what I mean? It's like
They're trying to kill
I
you.
think
Forever chemicals and everything.
And that's the thing too. It's like, yeah, we didn't have all these diseases because now it's like everything's plastic, all the pesticides. I mean, you literally can't run away from this stuff. It's in your
Companies
clothes.
just dumping chemicals into the water.
Yeah, it's like, the water supply, the air, like everything is contaminated. And I was, having discussion with a midwife about this where we were talking about EMFs and like, how like coaching pregnant women on like, don't use your laptop with it on your belly and like just simple things you can do to like reduce your baby's exposure to EMFs and stuff like that. And she was like, I tell people all this stuff, but at the end of the day, they're still being exposed to 5G, to, air pollutants, to, everything in their food. Like, even if you eat super healthy, it's like there still might be pesticides in your food.
Microplastics.
Like, there's microplastics, right? Like, there's no
And
way.
people peeing their antidepressants into the water supply.
Yeah, like literally, they're like, there's no way to
Or whatever
avoid, or it's extremely hard to avoid a lot of these things. So it's like, yeah, you can do your best, but still, and I think that the conversation stemmed from, we were talking about the necessity of ultrasounds, and I'm like, well, previously, like, people didn't use ultrasounds, like, is that really necessary? And she was like, well, I mean, like, obviously it's a personal decision, but there's a lot of birth defects, like, there's a lot of stuff that we weren't exposed to, so, like, it can sometimes be nice to have a fetal anatomy scan just to make sure, yeah, baby's organs are on the inside and whatnot. But
yeah, and that is like definitely a personal choice because like I totally understand the side of not wanting to subject your kids to whatever raise they get with, and I also totally understand I might not want to carry the baby to term if its organs are on the outside, like you said, or whatever.
Well, and there's certain things that like in the home birth setting, like that isn't compatible for life in the home birth setting.
Yeah.
You need to birth in the hospital,
Right.
but also like you kind of need to make terms for that because my stance was, at the time, I was very anti-ultrasound, and I'm like, I think it's bad. Like, these are my reasons. So I was I wanted to reach out to somebody because I'm like, can you, like, what is your point of this? Because I see you're ordering ultrasounds. Like, what do you feel about this? And that was her thing. Like, I think the pros outweigh the cons if you're using the technology responsibly. But also, like, the majority of babies are born perfectly healthy and fine.
And the other thing is there are people that go and get their babies like a million ultrasounds because they're so excited to see them. Like I have a friend, she's a really sweet girl. She's not stupid or anything like that, but she has had 3 babies and one was twins or 2 were twins. So she's been pregnant twice is what I'm trying to say. And nothing's wrong with the kids or anything, but she would go to these like 24/7 clinics where you can just go get ultrasounds over and over again.
The 3D ultrasounds and stuff
Yes.
like
Yeah, all
that.
that stuff.
She's
And
so
it really
excited.
should be. And it's nice that people are excited. And I think they're just misinformed. Like, people don't know about this stuff, like what you're exposing your child to, you know what I mean? Or even like the early ultrasounds, like,
Probably
I mean,
way
it's,
worse.
Yeah, it's just
Oh, you
like,
mean early in pregnancy?
yeah.
So that probably is worse too. I thought you meant like when they first invented ultrasounds.
Oh, they were
probably
using
worse.
X-rays.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like, you have to think about it. So, like, that's the other thing with ultrasounds, right? So, previously we were using X-rays. Now, if you're a nurse and you're pregnant, you're not even allowed in the X-ray room.
Yeah.
So, like, you can't even be exposed to that. Like, it's really serious because we know the negative interactions of that technology. Ultrasounds, it's like, okay, well, this is a new-ish technology. Yes, it's been studied. Yes, we know it's relatively safe. But what happens in 10 years when they come out with all of these negative things that are happening because of the ultrasounds, or maybe because of the other things that doctors are prescribing for women during pregnancy? And it's like, so to call someone negligent for opting out of these things, it's like, you don't really know what that's doing to you or your baby. So...
Right.
It absolutely is a personal decision, and I don't think people should be shamed because they don't want to do all of the testing that your doctor is like shaming you into.
Yeah. Even
It's okay, you don't need it.
even vets will shame you into things that they want you to do with your dogs.
Yeah, it's
and
how they
stuff.
make money.
Yeah. I don't really want to talk about the whole thing, but my vet is doing it to me right now. But after I put my foot down about it once, like she drops it. And that just makes it so clear to me that she's just trying to get money. And as soon as she realizes it's not going to be easy, like she just thought like, oh, she's young and she'll do whatever.
Yeah.
At one point I literally was like, okay, listen, I need to talk to my husband about this, okay? And she has not called me back about this test she wanted me to get my dog done.
So my youngest, I did my own healthcare, really.
Yeah.
And I didn't get any ultrasounds, and I had her in a hospital because there was no other option where we were. And so after I had her, I'm O negative, and the nurse came in.
Oh, yeah, you need the RhoGAM.
The nurse came in, and she was like, "You're sensitized now, and you can't have any more kids." And I was like, "Oh, really?"
Oh, really? Okay.
And then I got
What does
my
that
babies
mean? Sensitized.
So when you are O negative, if you get cross placental blood, then your body the next time you're pregnant will reject the baby because you build up antibodies that you didn't originally have to the baby's blood. But I got her paperwork, and she's also O negative, and I was like, so
it looks
how
like
exactly
there's no
do you
risk.
think that I'm sensitized? Because I wasn't when I had my last daughter, because I got tested right after, because she's not the same blood type.
Yeah.
And she is the same blood type as me. So will you explain that to me? And she's like, oh, I'll go look into that.
Literally,
and she never came back and
this
never
is
said
the thing
anything.
too.
They'll just straight lie to you.
Yeah. So there's like several women who say if you and your partner are both O negative, you don't need RhoGAM. There's zero chance that your baby is going to be positive.
What is this? That's a drug?
So RhoGAM, it's actually not a drug. It's a blood product that they make from other people, like serum from other people's blood.
Oh my God.
So that's why a lot of people don't want it, and it's very common to have reactions to it. So a lot of people try to avoid it. Whatever. So if you and your partner are both negative blood type, your baby can't be positive. Like, that's not how blood typing works. So a lot of women will be like, they'll be like, oh yeah, it's 28 weeks, you need your RhoGAM, and they're like, oh no, my partner's negative, so I actually don't need it. And they're like, essentially, and women have told me that the doctor has legit said this to them. Well, we don't know that it's his baby. All right, well, we're married, and that's the only person that I know who I had sex with. That's his child.
That's terrible.
And they're like, well, just in case, they essentially do not believe you. When you tell your doctors things, they don't always, and some doctors and nurses are good. Yeah, but they'll lie to you, and they're like,
and you got to pay for the RhoGAM or whatever.
Yeah, of course, or your insurance does, or you do, whatever, but they're trying to check off the boxes, and they're like, nope, we just have to do all these things. And I think a lot of times, when you're sharing information with your healthcare provider, they don't always believe you. And it's that's just so sad. And it's oh, and you're gonna be there to help me through my birth, and I'm supposed to trust you when you don't even trust me?
Medical gaslighting. That's not real.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just crazy. And it, the first woman that told that to me, I was like, no, that's insane. I can't believe they said that to you. And then after that, since then, I've heard at least 10, 15 women from all over the country say this. So this is a common thing where they'll be like, no, we don't believe you. Or they'll say that in a less abrasive way, oh, no, just in case. And
just
they're
in case it was
well,
a
you're a
different
doctor.
man.
Do you know how blood typing works?
Why would I take something just in case that I don't need?
Yeah. And
Other
then if you're
people's
oh,
blood.
well, I had this reaction to it. I got this rash, or I got really sick. It's one of the side effects from the RhoGAM. I think that was due to it. A lot of the times they'll be like, no, I don't think so. That doesn't really happen. And they're like, but it's listed as one of the side effects.
Must have been something else. I don't know.
Well, and speaking of them wanting to just check things off so that way they have their butts covered, one thing that really is so scary to me about people's stories of having babies that I've heard, a friend that just recently had a baby, it was her fourth baby. And she had a C-section the time before, her third baby, and this baby was going to come naturally, and she started labor, but then it ended up being fake labor, and her due date was coming up where they were like, okay, so if you don't have the baby by the 4th, we're going to, cut it out, have a C-section. And she said, well, what if the baby, since I keep having these contractions, what if I actually go into labor and I just start having the baby before then, which is what happened. But she said, the doctor said to her, well, we're just going to go ahead with cutting you open anyway then, because that's our game plan.
Right.
That's so messed up to do to someone.
Because it's easier. Because they can plan that. So instead of having a mystery length of labor.
In work.
You know, and it's a lot hard. It's just, let's just schedule, a major abdominal surgery where they cut through 7 layers of tissue.
Right. And she had a terrifying
No big deal.
Instead of doing the thing your body was made to do.
No big deal.
Right.
This was an interesting show tonight, so if you have any thoughts about this, we're going to be back on tomorrow. It's 603-283-6160. Put that in your phone and you can call in with whatever is on your mind. It's been Free Talk Live, and you can find more at freetalklive.com. Peace.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money